Welcome to the October 19, 2015 City Council Committee of the Whole. Tonight, we have a joint meeting with the Parks Commission. And just to get us started here, everybody make sure your microphones are on. And let's start over where Doug is and introduce yourself as Parks Commissioner or a council member.
Doug Eglinton, Parks Commission.
Bob Keller, City Council.
Stephanie Hibner, Parks Commission.
Nancy Way, Parks Commission.
Don Jaron, Council.
Lorene Leo, Parks Commission.
Tom Vance, Council.
Ben Yazigi, City Manager.
Hank Klein, Parks Commission.
Nancy Whitten, Council.
Cheryl Wagner, Park Commission.
Romero Valderrama Ramayo, City Council.
Sid Gupta, Parks Commission.
Tom O'Dell, Council.
Kathleen Huckabee, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, first on our agenda is public comment. Do we have a list?
Mayor, there's one gentleman's name here is not readable. It's called David Hoffman.
I don't know who that is.
Let's just scratch him off.
We've heard enough. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council, 3 minutes limit per person, or 5 minutes if representing the official position of a recognized community organization. First on my list is David Hoffman.
Is the mic off?
Is the mic on now? There it is. Wow. What a welcome.
Just a little harassment there.
I appreciate it. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is David Hoffman. I'm here representing the Master Builders Association of King and Sammamish counties, and here to speak on the park impact fees. Almost said the tree ordinance, but that one's done with. So we don't have to talk about that one anymore. So the park impact fees. This is a significant increase in the park impact fees. We recognize that growth has a need to pay for the needs that it creates, and we understand the park impact fees are legally allowed to be collected by cities, and so we appreciate the process that you all have gone through, appreciate the time that staff has provided to sit down and talk to us about this and walk through the study and walk through the process. So thank you for that. Particularly, what I would like to speak to are the platted projects who have reached or are really close to reaching final plat. Those folks that have based their financing on the impact fee as it is currently implemented or at the rate that it is currently set at the city. And just point out that for those folks, this would create a financial situation that may be hard to overcome in some cases. So a couple of things that we would suggest and encourage is doing as some other cities, Kirkland and Issaquah have done, is delayed implementation by a couple of months to allow those projects to apply for their building permits. And those are the projects that are already in the pipeline, and we know where they're at, and they're moving forward. So future projects are not in the same situation, and that would be a great step. So we would suggest a February 1 implementation date for this. Another approach would be a phased-in implementation. So you go to 70% right out of the gate, which would be a doubling of the current impact fee. And then go to 85% at another date certain, and then 100% at the end. So in the end, the city will be collecting 100% of the impact fee, just phasing it in to provide some predictability and consistency for the industry. And otherwise, just really want to thank you again for the time that you have provided me to speak this evening and for meeting with us to discuss this. So thank you very much.
Okay.
In regard to this issue of equity for the builders who are relying on the financing, would a delay in not in the amount, but in the time of payment, for example, on sale like we do, I think, with some of our interventions, or do on sale?
Right.
Would extending the time for the payment of it until they
The way that I understand it, and city manager, you might correct me on this if I'm incorrect, but if a builder chooses to defer paying the impact fee until closing, and then the fee comes out of the proceeds of the sale, the fee that would be paid at that point would be whatever the city is set at. So it would not be the existing fee today necessarily. It would, if the fee goes up over time, it would be that later fee.
Right, but we could, but for the equity you're talking about, couldn't we just say it's gonna be the new fee, but that you have more time to pay it until you have cash in?
That would certainly be an option.
So,
Why don't we continue that discussion when we get our presentation?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Next up is Douglas Bean.
I'm not a regular like the other gentleman is. I am an individual, but I also, I'm the president of Lake Washington Youth Soccer Association. We are in the world of youth.
Please
Go ahead.
give your name and address first.
Douglas Bean, 2028 East Lake Sammamish Parkway.
Thank you.
Like I said, I am the president of Lake Washington Youth Soccer Association. We are a silent majority when it comes to rental fields. I was involved in a study 8 years ago. I don't recognize many faces from that study about building new fields and more fields and whatnot. So I've been in this process a long time. We typically stay away. Frankly, it's because we're involved in 5 different metropolitan areas. My purpose here is really to discuss the rental agreement increase, or the turf rental and the natural grass increase over the time. I was talking to some of my other youth sport cohorts, and they will probably present cases about hardship, and this is true. I mean, yeah, will you price some of our youth out of the sport leagues? Probably not. I don't think that actually will be even felt. So this is a full honest, and I don't know if that's a good decision. I'm not a politician. My full honest appraisal is you can do it, and we'll pay it. We're captive. We're not going to go anywhere else. That's why we literally rent almost every available hour from you guys. But the reality is, I want to encourage you to consider this. The whole full recovery mode, when I sit down with my kids and have conversations about what do we pay taxes for, what does the city provide, I can no longer say parks. That's not why they collect taxes, because we have this full recovery rental thing over here. So the city no longer essentially provides turf and grass fields for our kids to play sports on. Apparently they pay for that. And it doesn't feel right. It doesn't sit right with me, so I just want to go on paper saying I don't think that's good. And just because we would doesn't mean you should. And so I want the city council to really consider that and the planning commission just to, I realize other cities and areas are going to a full cost recovery mode. This is a trend. But I know it did not exist when you were in youth sports. It did not exist for your parents when they were putting you through youth sports. So I'm not sure why all of a sudden we think it's a great idea, now that many of you might not have children in youth sports, to all of a sudden shift the burden onto them. So it's one of those conversations, conceptual. I don't really have any statistics to say we no longer can play youth sports because you're pricing us out of it. We will continue to pay for it, but I just think you really ought to consider at what point do you stop. Any questions for me? We do operate 1,500 kids in Sammamish, 1,500 households, and we are deciding to be a little more political in the future. Thank you.
oh, can I?
Please.
I appreciate your comments, and I wanted to understand whether you provide scholarships to families that are not able to either pay the current fee, which is a full cost recovery fee, or the future potential cost recovery fee.
That's a great question. We do provide scholarships. Now, the way our scholarships are done, like most other youth sports, they use the same parameters the government does. I suspect most of us do, for people who get free lunches at school, provide scholarships. So yeah, you're probably not, but we do amortize it over the whole organization. So it's hard to tell a one-to-one. It's not like we'll go and increase it $3. We'll wait 3 years and then increase it 15 to offset all the other cities who are doing the same.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Hey, Doc, good to see you. Thank you for doing a great job for our kids. And,
No, you're welcome.
And Actually, 3 of my kids were in
Oh.
the association.
Well, hey, that's good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah. You asked a question, so I'll answer that question perhaps. What was the city's intent to go for the full recovery? Quite often, when jurisdictions or agencies run into financial problems, the very first thing gets on the chopping block, whether it's the schools or the cities, is the parks programs and park infrastructure, or for the schools case, that the after-school extracurricular activities.
Yep.
Our council valued this particular service for our kids, and they wanted to make sure that we have sufficient funds, that once we pay for the initial cost, that we would have the replacement cost and in timely way to replace those facilities so we can continue to have those great facilities for our kids. That was the reason and logic that we went for it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Brian Carter.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address the council, and thank you to the Parks and Rec Commission for listening to me again. They had to hear from me earlier this month. I am the new president. Yes?
Could you go ahead and give your name and address?
Yes, it's Brian Carter, address 204 239th Way Southeast, right here in Sammamish. I offered to this Parks and Rec Commission. You guys can all come over later if you want. It's really, really close. But all kidding aside, I'm the new president for East Lake Little League. We proudly served 686 kids in our league in ages 4 to 18 in softball and baseball last year. Next year, we'll be celebrating our 25th anniversary in the city of Sammamish. So we've been around a while. We got a lot of kids involved in the community here. 100% of our kids live here in the city of Sammamish. I also happen to coach kids in Doug's league, Lake Washington Youth Soccer, so it's great to see Doug here.
I have kids in his league.
Yeah. But I also coach, flag football, basketball, everything. I mean, we're actively involved in the community here. So I had an opportunity to see some more information and insight about the recommendations from the Parks and Rec Commission and the added detail that was shared about some of the things that you have to decide on this evening. And I just wanted to be here to kind of share a little perspective so you can hear basically from the kids, as a representative of the kids and the families in our league. Fields are a big deal for us. It's the second greatest expense for our league. We set our registration fees not to recoup and go full recovery mode. We try to leverage a lot of the contributions we do receive from the volunteer hours that a lot of our folks donate through the companies they work with and the matching programs they have. So we try to subsidize that to maintain it so that it is something that is very feasible to more families. I heard the question about scholarships earlier. We do provide scholarships to those families that need it so that all kids can participate in Little League. So anyway, my point being that field expenses are about 1/3 of our budget. Any increase is going to have a significant impact. Our greatest expense are equipment and uniforms, just the basic stuff you have to provide to participate. The proposal that I think ultimately was decided upon was a 10% increase in the natural field rental fees for youth, and I think a 7% increase for the turf field. Seems like a pretty significant increase. I realize that the city aspires to a full cost recovery model. I think if you move to that, whether it's near term or in the intermediate term, you're pretty much going to price a lot of folks out of it. They're going to have to think twice. Now, to Doug's point, will they pay it? Yeah. I mean, we're here. You have a captive audience. We have nowhere to go. But I'm asking for, I guess, a more reasonable approach as we do assess the fees. So I would advocate for no increases, but I realize that's not realistic, so we won't be ridiculous. But I would just say my concern was that we were trying to just, even though the dollar amount was nominal that was proposed, percentage-wise, it seems like we're trying to subsidize the incredible expense of the turf fields by raising the rates a little bit higher on the natural fields. So I would advocate for a more nominal increase, something more tied to, say, cost of living adjustments, inflation, what have you, going forward. So Yes.
Brian and Doug, to both of you, I'm just curious, you mentioned you had 686 kids, and you mentioned you have 1,500 here on the plateau. We have a 90% plus utilization rate of our fields. Would you be able to, if we had more fields, to fill those fields at that same utilization? And if so, how many would you guesstimate?
I guess I'll answer first since I'm up here, Doug, so I got the microphone, right?
You're up.
Yeah. I would say we're going to be moving off turf. Right now, about 20% of our usage is on turf fields. Even at $56, it's, plus lights, it gets a little expensive. Going to 60 or greater, we pretty much have to move on. I mean, seeing that the increase, I think the turf rates in Sammamish are already the second highest in the area, at least with the study that was presented. The only higher one is a commercial field at Starfire, if I read the data correctly. So we're going to move off of that. So that's not helping the challenge there. We'll probably have to use more of the dirt fields at the elementary schools and just jam people in and limit the time and shorten the time. We just have so many teams, so many limited abilities, so many limited fields we can use. We're maxing those out, and that's why we've used the turf. Now we're going to have to recalibrate and figure out how to move off of the turf and use more dirt and grass. So I don't know if we're going to be playing in people's backyards or what, but we'll do what we have to do.
Thank you for that. Doug?
Yeah, we'll present, so I also will add in, my brother's president of East Lake Lacrosse. So I have a couple extra added, and they serve a healthy size user group and growing. The reality is if you build it, we will rent it. We have ongoing relationships with, for example, King County. We have fields rented year-round, hours every day, just nonstop. It doesn't even matter. We just take everything. So if you build it, we will rent it. Now, there will be a saturation point. If you build 8 fields, that's going to be a problem. But if you build 3 fields, between football, lacrosse, and ourselves, we'll consume it. So I do think there's some level of economies of scale we should get at some point, not as far as rental fees, but as far as cost structure. So we would love to see turf fields, the back of Leewood Junior High, or wherever you put them. Any park, we'll take them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Don?
Just a quick question. Do you think there's a demand for indoor soccer fields in Sammamish?
Ooh, good question. So, yeah, clearly practice, the whole thing. The indoor facility usage has been essentially there's one for-profit company that's doing it in competition. I would suggest if you're going to swoop it in as part of the community center, it would be used. If you're actually asking, it would be used. Your scope will change dramatically. You're going to lose. I mean, the height thing will be interesting. I don't know how high and big you want to go, but football and lacrosse typically don't rent indoor facilities at all. So your scope is getting more narrow. So I would encourage you to consider outdoor. We'll use it, and it's cheaper. That's my suggestion.
And I'll say we would definitely use an indoor baseball facility in the Northwest.
There you go.
Sign us up for that. But I'm not sure the price tag would warrant the limited use we provide. So we would have to partner with.
Yes. And ironically, if you came to us and said we'd like to build something, we'd partner with you. Like King County's coming to us and they're looking at maybe, well, I probably shouldn't say some of these things, but we have many cities and government and local councils who come to us saying, we want to build this. If we provide the land, will you pay for it? You guys, I mean, think outside the box. We're doing this. And I know lacrosse has done this very effectively in Kirkland, and I'm sure you guys all know about that. So there is areas that you can tap, but overarching just generically charging every youth more is not how you're going to tap those resources. You'll tap the resources by partnering with the Little Leagues and building these things. Like how the Little Leagues built all those storage units and all that stuff all over East Lake. That's fantastic stuff. They did it somehow very effectively. If you do that, you'll get way more. You'll make the users happy, and the city will be happy because it doesn't cost you as much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Keep in mind, tonight, this is a study session. We're looking at the Parks Commission recommendations, so no decisions are being made tonight. There'll be a lot of questions asked as we go on. Anyone else for public comment? Please step up to the microphone, and you have 3 minutes. Please give your name and address.
My name is Paul Fent. I live at 26613 Southeast 22nd Way. And I've been in Sammamish for 10 years, and I lived in Klahani before that, so I've been on the plateau for 25 years. I'm here today to actually speak on my own behalf and on behalf of a group of guys that actually cover a pretty significant percent of the amount of fees that you collect from adults from your fields. And that is we actually contribute about 15% of the fees that you collect from adults in Sammamish per year, because we play 50 weeks a year, sometimes actually every weekend of the year, play 2 hours every day on Saturday. And we are also cover about 5% of your total fees that are collected. And when I say we, I mean me. And when I say me, I mean me and 25 guys that get together every Saturday morning. They pitch in a few bucks, and we cover the $163 that we're charged. So in the last year, we've contributed about $8,000, and I estimated that since we started doing this in about 2009, we've paid in about $50,000. And this is when we're talking about something where, you know, when you were kids, you could go to the park and play. When we're now adults, we can't just go to the park and play. We have to buy our space. We're happy to do that, but we like to have a little bit of equity in some of this. So right now, let's get into the numbers. So we're paying about, like I said, about 15% of the total adult fees just from this group of people, these 25 guys, not 1,000, not 500, these 20 guys that are playing regularly and about 20 more that are pitching in when they come on occasion. And so we, of the 655 hours that you rent to adults, we're taking about 15% of that. And we're grateful because we're good customers and because we pay year-round, we get a good time slot. We get Saturday morning at 9 o'clock because we pay the most to pay there, and so it's good business for the city to rent us the field. But I think that my main point is I think that the increase is unbalanced. And just to get a little perspective is that it's a 7.1% increase for the youth, but for the adults it's 10.4%. I'm not sure how or why, where that comes from, but it just seems just kind of inherently unfair. And just to get a little perspective, if you just added $1 to the youth fees with the amounts that you had, that would completely cover all the extra money that you think you would be getting from the adults. So it's not like that's the kind of weighting between the adults and the children that we're talking about. And one of the things I think is important is that, you know, we're going to, as best as I can, we're going to continue to show up and we're going to continue to play, but we're reaching a price point where I can't. And so if we go away, you instantly lose 15% of the adult fees. There's not someone else waiting to pick that piece up. And the reason I know that this price point is there is that we also, our break from our league is during the holiday. So we'll rent 3 to 5 weeks during the holiday during December and into January, and it costs us about $200 a night. So I ask everybody to pitch in about $10 and I'll do it. Well, when the fees went up the last time, $10 wouldn't cover it anymore. So I was covering the extra money that it was taking. So I asked and polled everybody. I went one year where I was saying, please give me $15. And I polled everybody last year and said, are you willing to pay $15 to go play? And they said, no, that's it. That's too much. I'm not going to pay anymore. And it doesn't seem like much, but so what happened is I didn't rent 5 times. That's $1,000, and $1,000 adds up, and $1,000 continue to adds up. So I'm asking that you at least consider that there are equitable raises between the different things. We want to continue to pay here. And there's one other thing, just kind of as an aside, GSSL, which is the Greater Seattle Soccer League that I play in, too, we rent the fields a lot up here. And there's 2-3 teams that play here. And I think you guys, Hank and Ben, are playing on these guys. They're playing 9 other games here. After every game, they go to the ale house. The other team goes to the ale house. So we're attracting people into town that are spending money in town. The GSSL has a market of the whole area. And I can see, based on where they're scheduling our games, they're going to cheaper places. They have to, because if they can get a place for $50 versus a place for $80, they're going to schedule us where it's $50. So those games are going to start to go away. So the increases are going to start to work against you, where you're going to start losing money.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment, please? Give your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Brian Rooney. My address is 19528 Southeast 21st Street. I am the president of Sammamish Little League. I wanted to speak on behalf of the other half of the plateau, if you will. Brian did a very eloquent job, far more than I would ever be able to. Thus, I will make mine brief and to the point. I've been a member of the Little League for 10 years. Was on the board, or have been on the board for 9, and spent the last 2 as the president of the league. The previous 7, I was in charge of facilities, so I was very well and familiar with your city maintenance crew. Got to know them very, very well, and appreciate the hard work that they do. I joke that the only difference I found between being president of a Little League and being the facilities director is that while I dealt with a lot of honey buckets in facilities, they never emailed me at 3 o'clock in the morning. I would just ask that you please be aware, as Brian so eloquently put, about the costs. Our finances are very similar to theirs. It is impactful. We rarely rent the turf fields. We're just on the natural fields at Beaver Lake Park, which have presented their own challenges. We would ask that you be aware and cognizant of the costs of those and how we are a nonprofit, and we're working and supporting, like I said, the other half of the plateau. And last year we had upwards of 700 kids playing from the age of 5 all the way to 12, actually 14. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, public comment is closed.
Mr. Mayor, for the record, that Hank goes to the ale house. I don't go to ale house after the games.
Okay, Lee, we have 4 topics tonight. We're going to start with the synthetic turf issue. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, commissioners. Tonight is the joint meeting that we want to talk about about 4 park issues. The synthetic turf infill options has been an issue recently in the news, and we wanted to have some information on this. We got our consultant, and I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed Parks Director, Jesse Bond, to introduce the consultant to give us the staff report.
Thank you. Thank you, Council, Commission, and Mr. City Manager. As you may recall, a couple weeks ago, you authorized a contract with D.A. Hogan for the design of the turf replacement at Eastlake High School Community Sports Fields number 1 and number 2. We're not here debating whether or not the turf needs to be replaced. It does, in fact, need to be replaced. What we wanted to talk about tonight is our choice of infill products. And I'm not even going to bother getting into all the technical details. I'm going to turn it over to Bob Harding with D.A. Hogan for the presentation. Bob?
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, council members and park commissioners and public and city manager. As Jesse said, I'm Bob Harding with D.A. Hogan Associates. We are the design consultant, and I've been responsible for the design and construction management of essentially every field that is on the Eastlake High School campus site, both those that are the responsibility of the school district as well as with the Parks Department. The current design process that we're going through is the replacement of the infield synthetic turf on field number 1 and number 2. Those are outlined in the red dash line up on the board. These were installed originally in 2005 through a joint use agreement and interlocal agreement between the city and the school district. Just to center you then a little bit more on the site, the stadium field right in here was replaced this summer by the school district at the conclusion of that field's life. And in 2012, the baseball field was removed and replaced through, again, a joint use agreement between the city and the school district.
With turf?
That one is synthetic turf, correct. So everything out there that is at least on this screen, the football field, field 1 and 2, and the baseball field are all synthetic turf. The scope of the work that we're looking at is to remove the turf that's there as part of that removal process. all the turf and all the infill is removed and goes away from the site. There's some adjustments that occur to the base, the aggregate base that's below that. There's some repairs that occur around the perimeter of the field, both with respect to fencing and the anchoring system. We installed new soccer goal anchors. We installed some new quick coupler valves and basically spruce up the field for the next 10 to 12 years. As part of that, we replaced the turf with a new infilled synthetic turf product. Product isn't known, but what we're talking about tonight certainly is the process, the components that go into it, as well as the infill. Synthetic turf is really a system. It starts at the base, all the way down at the bottom of subgrade, and proceeds right up to the top of the turf, the green part that most often is seen. Much of what is part of a synthetic turf system is never seen except for by me and the contractor and a few others as it's being constructed. I'm going to work from the top down. So the first part is the turf fiber. That's the green part. That is the playing surface. It's a mixture of polyethylene, polypropylene fibers typically. They're about 2.5 to 2.25 inches long. I have a sample up here if anybody wants to see what synthetic turf looks like before it becomes a field. And that's the visible part at the surface. Going to the next level down, the infill material. The synthetic turf fields are resilient. They provide fall protection and safety for the users. So the infill material, which is really what we're talking about tonight, is the part that provides cushioning. It provides stability to the fibers, and it is, if you will, the root zone that holds the fibers, the synthetic turf fibers, up to vertical. That is the part that really the players are playing on between the infill materials as well as the synthetic turf fibers. Directly below that, and certainly something that we'll be considering and reviewing with staff, is the use of a shock pad. So a shock pad is an additional resilient layer that would go below the synthetic turf. Provides for a couple things: long-term impact resistance, so this field is safer over a longer period of time, and it provides a bit more stability to the permeable aggregate or the base that's directly below that. All of these components that I've listed so far, and every one that I will actually talk about, are all permeable. So any water that falls on the field, whether it be rainfall or cleanup water, is incorporated vertically. It goes vertically down through the field, and it goes down into the subsurface drainage system. There's no surface water runoff across the field. So directly then below the shock pad or the synthetic turf is the drainage rock, pipe, and fabric. All of this is in place. None of it really needs to be changed. Those are considered a long-term investment, so they're a municipal improvement, if you will, an infrastructure that will last 30 to 40 years. So there's nothing really that occurs with that other than we confirm and make sure that the base is draining as it should. All of the pipes that are there under the field are existing. They don't get disturbed. And the outfall, or where that water goes, it goes on to other storm drainage facilities on the campus, and none of that changes. So really, it's when we're talking about replacement of the field, it's not unlike if you were to change a carpet in your house. You take the carpet and the pad off, you put that in new. You don't usually change your floor and your plumbing and the foundation in order to change your carpet. So it's kind of a similar thing. And then the natural turf subgrade, or the natural subgrade, which is below all of that, that isn't disturbed at all either. So really what we're talking about occurs at the surface, or the near surface, which will be the turf fiber at the top and the infill material. As Jesse has mentioned, there's been a lot of information in the news, both national news and local, about various turf infill materials and the advantages or what those products are. Currently, on the field, both in the multi-purpose field, so fields 1 and 2, as well as the baseball field, the infill material, or the shock-absorbing layer, is a mixture of SBR, rubber, and sand. So SBR is styrene butadiene rubber. It's ground-up tires. That is what it is. That is the standard of infill that has occurred typically over the last 15 years on more or less every synthetic turf field that's been constructed. in Western Washington, with the exception of a few. So there's hundreds of fields, and that's pretty much the product. And that's the existing product. There are some of the information that's out in the blogosphere and certainly in the community. There's certainly some questions about the products and the chemicals that may or may not be released with that and what those potential health impacts may be. I think we could stop talking about that product almost immediately right now because we're not going to use that. That is not the recommendation of what we're going to use. So when the field is removed and the existing infill is removed, that all goes away off-site, and we're not going to be using the straight SBR rubber. What we will be considering are one of several different options. The first one I'd like to talk to you about is coated SBR rubber. So you notice there's a clue there in the name. It still has some SBR rubber in it, but it is an encapsulated rubber. So it is coated with an acrylic coating and then a clear coat over the top of that. So the rubber granules itself are encapsulated. They are entombed, if you will, inside of another coating. So the part that's in the rubber granule isn't exposed to the surface. It's the acrylic surface. The school district has recently replaced the stadium field, and they've used a coated SBR rubber. I have some samples of that. We actually use that product at the warning track on the baseball field out on the site right now. We used it for some different reasons, but we have some on site. So the site has this product already. It is costly. It is a little bit more costly than the straight SBR rubber because of the coating that goes over the top of that. And when it indicates it's about 3 times the cost of the crumb rubber, that really is the product cost. The installation process and the installation cost is the same, whether it is a coated SBR rubber or a straight crumb rubber. The other option that we're considering is called Nike Grind. Nike it's manufactured by Nike. It comes as a process or a byproduct of the manufacture of their tennis shoes. And really, if you think about if you were to be sewing, maybe not all of us sew, but certainly as you have some leftover parts. In this case, when they make rubber and put rubber around tennis shoes, there's some leftover pieces that fall on the floor and that are excess. So those are kind of the left behinds. Those get ground up as part of a recycling effort by Nike, and that is the product that we're talking about. It's a ground up tennis shoe tire, not tire, but tennis shoe rubber. It's largely imported from where the shoes are manufactured in Southeast Asia. The school district, this Issaquah School District, has recently installed this on a couple different fields, one at both the Beaver Lake Middle School as well as Pacific Cascade Middle School. This product has a limited supply, and it tends to be spoken for well in advance. So this requires a little bit more lead time as part of the planning process. We should order that more or less before the end of this year, if not sooner, so that we can guarantee its availability when the field gets replaced next summer. And this material is about 4 times the cost of crumb rubber. So installation costs the same. Again, so it's the product cost, the ground up pieces. Also, what has been in the news recently has been the idea of using an organic infill. Most commonly called, this is geoturf or geofill. This is really a combination of coconut fiber, cork, and rice husks. It's a ground up mulch, very fine, sort of in the same size range, certainly as the ground up tire or the Nike Grind or the coated rubber. So it's an organic alternative. It has been used on multiple fields in Europe, mostly in Italy because it was developed more by one of the Italian turf manufacturers. There is one field in the Pacific Northwest that has used that, and that's been installed about a month ago. There's not a long track record for it. For what we can understand, because it's organic, it tends to be very light, and it tends to want to migrate or displace or blow away, much the same that you would think mulch or dust would blow away. So it needs to be watered in order to maintain a certain amount of moisture in it so it stays within its place. So you need to water your synthetic turf field in this case in order to maintain the moisture level in the infill. As an organic product, it will tend to break down over time. Think about bark mulch in your yard. That tends to break down as well, and you have to replenish that. In this case, because of the fine-grained nature of it, you would need to kind of break this up and add more material every few years. There isn't any really long-term performance data available for the product, particularly in our climate, where it stays potentially moist and wet for 3 or 4 months at a time. Obviously, we wouldn't be watering there during the winter, but since it's installed more often in a drier climate, it has that ability to dry and be wet, dry and be wet. In this case, I think we're going to be wet for 4 or 5 months at a time, and so we don't really have any performance information about that, whether it will break down a little bit more or how the footing might occur on that. So when I think about performance, it's not only the product, but how it's played upon. In this case, also, we would require, or the product would require, an elastic pad. So it's going to need that additional cushioning because the material tends to consolidate and conglomerate as an organic will. It tends to bind together. This is a more expensive option, not only from the standpoint of the actual cost of the product, but your maintenance costs are going to be more. You have to replenish the material. It takes more grooming, and you have to water it. And that means you have to either have an automatic irrigation system to apply that water, or you need to have labor to be able to apply that water. So from a product standpoint, particularly since it does not have an extensive track record in our climate, and for the other reasons, we're not recommending that, mostly because we don't have enough data on it yet, and because of the increased cost. So, a little summary chart here for you on going from left to right. A coated SBR rubber, it encapsulates rubber particles. It comes in several colors, tan and a light green. It has an 8 to 10 year warranted lifespan, so that would mirror or be the same, coincident with the synthetic turf. It has an increased cost, about 3 times the cost of the crumb rubber. With respect to the Nike grind, it is more or less a recycled product. It is an original manufacturer, so the recycle about it is just it's retasking materials that would normally be disposed of. It also has an 8 to 10 year lifespan. There isn't a great deal of testing available on this, so not independently tested. I've listed up there. We have data sheets on what is not supposed to be in the product, mostly because Nike indicates as part of the manufacturer, these are the components, these are the products you can't use. You can't put these things into our tennis shoes. That's not quite the same as positively saying what is in this. And so we don't have that testing data available, and nor does it seem like it's forthcoming from the manufacturer. It comes in a limited supply, and it certainly has an increased cost. Then over on the right side, just to summarize, the GeoTurf or the GeoFill, it's got a couple brand names that are out there. It is 100% recyclable. It is organic. It can be recycled at the end of its life cycle on the field. But every 2 years, we need to add more material. From what we understand, about 20%. So every 2 years, we'll be adding about 20% to the infill. Because it's an organic, it will break down. Its long-term performance is not really known yet, particularly in our climate, and particularly when it's dry. And we certainly had a beautiful summer, and it was warm this summer. It'll need to be watered every day. So you're watering your synthetic turf. Think about that one. And it's quite a bit more expensive than the crumb rubber. So that's a lot of words in a really short time frame, and I'm sorry for running through those things so quickly.
I'm sure
but-
we have questions. I'll start off, but I wonder, I look at the Nike material, I wonder if, since we don't know a lot about it, whether they'll be asking for that to be coated in 6 or 7 years from now. So that's the question I have for that. Don, you had your hand up?
Yeah, you aren't showing us what percentage of the total replacement cost the infill is, so it's hard to get a feel of, is that 25% of the total cost with the Nike grind, or what are we talking about?
With respect to the infill, excuse me, with respect to the infill, for the field, if we were to use the coated rubber out of, right now, the overall budget is about $950,000 nominally. The increased cost to use the coated rubber, so not using the SBR rubber, but using the coated rubber, increases the product cost, the overall project cost, by a little over $100,000. So that's 10% of the entire cost, but it's really 3 times the cost on the infill materials.
So the Nike would be 200,000.
That is correct. You're spot on that. So the increased cost on the overall project is $200,000 for Nike.
Kathy, you have a question?
Yes, I do. What I wondered is there a differential in the annual maintenance costs between the coated SBR rubber and the Nike, or do we not know?
From what we've seen, there is not a significant cost impact one or the other. There's with respect to maintenance costs. They both are groomed. They tend to stay in the same locations. It's not really migratory. It doesn't. In other words, it doesn't move around on the site. It probably is adhered to your clothing, similar to what crumb rubber is right now. So no significant difference in the maintenance cost between those two products.
Bob Keller?
A couple of simple questions. Obviously, the reason for the coated rubber is the concern about the fumes or whatever from the uncoated rubber. This is the same rubber, right? So that is it, quick question, 100% recycled as well? Is this all from tires?
So you're absolutely right. The coated SBR rubber is recycled tires, ground up small, washed, clean, they go through a magnet, and then they're coated after that. So it is encapsulated, the SBR granule is encapsulated in an acrylic coating.
Yeah, I'm curious if that's been, the coating has been around long enough in that you said encapsulated, not impregnated. It's not in the material, it's
Correct.
actually around it. Is there a question about the longevity of the coating? You know, it's going to be out in the environment, there's going to be rain going through it, is there, weathering? Do we have chemicals from the coating going into the substructure?
Sure.
Is that all tested enough to know?
All good questions. The warranty documents that we have from the coater, the manufacturer of the coated rubber, their warranty indicates that the coating will adhere to the rubber throughout the 8 to 10 year warranty period. So I think that it's possible if you were to put this on pavement and drive back and forth over it with a vehicle or however destructive methods you would want to do, you could probably grind the coating off. I think in the case that we have here, which is largely foot traffic and an occasional maintenance vehicle, the data that we have and the warranty that we have from the supplier of that product would suggest that the encapsulation is going to adhere and be around that rubber granulate for the life of the warranty, which would be the life of the product on the field. About every 10 years, plus or minus, and that's right where we are with the fields right now, the type fiber is going to wear out. The field is going to wear out and will require a replacement. As part of that, we remove all of the infill and the fiber and bring in new, just like this project proposes. So.
Just one quick question: the performance between the Nike grind and the SBR. One seems to be lighter than the other. If I think of a shoe as opposed to a tire, the density of the two and the weight of the two. So, what does the performance look like?
From what we've seen so far, the performance is very similar. You're absolutely right. It is a little bit lighter, but it tends to lock in and combine together. It has it locks up, if you will. Still resilient, but there's enough angled pieces in it. Think of sand on the beach that's really angular sand, and they tend to kind of lock up and get firm. We've had it in place for almost a year at Beaver Lake. That they were done in March of this year, and Pacific Cascade in January.
I was really leading to, can you hit a ball farther?
I don't know whether you can hit a ball farther. I think initially there might be some visual differences because as you can see there, it comes from every color of tennis shoe that's out there: black, red, green, orange, blue. So it looks a little confetti-ish, if you will. And I have a sample here if you want to see what it's like, not on the screen, but it does consolidate. So.
Thank you.
Tom Odell?
Thanks. Actually, some of my questions have already been asked and answered, but I'm wondering if there is another option we need to think about. And perhaps the consultant can comment on this. We're dealing with materials that are granular in nature. All of these are. And is there perhaps a plastic material, plastic bead type thing that could be used? Or can we consider using just plain old sand?
You want to respond to that?
I could certainly respond to that. Excuse me. There is a plastic product available. It's called thermoplastic. It is, in its simplest term, really small little wine corks. So if you think about that size of element, just like we have here, it is available. It is relatively unused in the region, primarily because of cost. It is going to be more in the 8 to 10 times the cost of the SBR rubber. We have one small rooftop field that was installed at Northwest School for different reasons than infill. It was above a gymnasium, so they didn't want to be walking through with that. So that is an option. A long time ago, back in the 70s and 80s, when we were doing infield fields, we had elastic layer pads that were about 35 millimeter below a short pile field that had 100% sand as the infill. That is an option. They're quite a bit more abrasive, so you tend to, particularly slide tackling or sliding across it with the sand, you tend to be quite a bit more abrasive. We can certainly make it soft enough underneath, and soft isn't the right term, but cushioned enough to do the fall protection, but it is not as a desirable surface to play on. You would need to use a more expensive fiber, and pound for pound, the sand is more expensive than rubber, frankly, because of the gradations required. So those are certainly options, but they're more cost prohibitive, if you will.
Councilmember Witt?
I have enjoyed your presentation, thank you, I think it's excellent. My concerns have always been within the health area. First of all, cancers are associated with some type of oil-based products. Secondly, in the past, there have been studies that, or some suggestions that there may be a link between the artificial turf and their ability to hold bacteria or viral type of things, and that some injuries on a soccer player, for example, may be more serious on this kind of a field than if they were being played on natural turf. What can you tell us about any health risks that are established or that might be suspected for these different types of material and injuries as well as the disease risk?
Thank you. That's a wide continuum of questions.
Right, I know. But that's what I thought this would be.
Yeah, so with respect to, let's start with the first one. You're probably thinking of MRSA or some other bacteriological element that would come in contact. So
strep or
or whatever those were. So most of those components don't live outside in full sunlight. In fact, there's probably each of those on natural grass fields. They're on the sidewalk. They're on any outdoor surface, frankly, and it's just a matter of how long they survive. And I'm not using this because I'm particularly knowledgeable about this. I'm a landscape architect. I'm not an epidemiologist or a scientist, but certainly those folks that do make a study of that with appropriate peer-reviewed studies, particularly out of Penn State, have done studies specifically with synthetic turf in the infill materials and have concluded that synthetic turf field and the infill sand and rubber has no increased disease risk, if you will, just to say that. From a safety standpoint, from a user injury, I think that synthetic turf, one synthetic turf field is sort of can offer the equivalent of 5 or 6 or 7 times the amount of use than a natural turf field, even if both are maintained in the most excellent condition. There is no increase in user injuries per use than there are natural turf versus synthetic turf. You may get more injuries because you have more user hours and there's more people using it, but there are not more injuries on synthetic turf versus a natural turf. In fact, I would suggest there's a more likelihood that because the synthetic turf is a more consistent surface throughout the life of the product with a consistent amount of maintenance, that it is a more consistent surface than a natural turf that ultimately ends up being displaced, gets overmowed, the turf fiber, the natural turf crown of the plant gets removed, you end up developing holes, and now you have different footing problems, so you have different injury options. With respect to studies there, again, I'll clarify this. I'm not a scientist, but most of the news and many of the studies are more, at this point, anecdotal. We bet that there's something that's wrong with this because tires are bad. And so there aren't any studies that make a causal link between use of infill rubber, SBR rubber infill, and any elevated increase in cancers. There just aren't any out there. Certainly EPA could do a better job of studying, and certainly Consumer Protection and CPSC could certainly think about doing some studies. So far they haven't, because they've done studies 8 years ago and tires are essentially the same as they were 8 or 10 years ago, and there weren't any issues there. So every scientific study will say, yeah, but more study is needed, and I think that's every scientist will say that so they can do another study, because they're studying a specific point in time, and they're not willing to make a statement that says this is good forever kind of thing. So
we can't relate to that. We have a scientist here.
Councilmember Valderrama, and then
Yeah, I think this one might be more directed to Jesse. A year ago, the coach of East Lake High School soccer, Coach Jervis, sent in an email to the Parks Department about his concerns, because this was going to take place a year ago, on health concerns of the field, and I think it was mostly towards the crumb rubber, as I recall. As we were beginning this process, I reached out to make sure that you were either going to be in touch with East Lake High School programs or with the school district, and I understood from the city manager that you had a liaison with the school district. I see your recommendation that's here. What was the school district's recommendation as far as the field?
Yeah, actually, we just spoke with them again today to confirm the recommendation, and they are recommending, well, they're not recommending any particular infill material, but they're aware that we're replacing the turf. They fully support it, and they know that we're considering two different infill products. So they haven't said one way or the other which material to use.
And did you go back to the high school to ask East Lake High School coaches if they had an infill preference?
My point of contact is with the Lake Washington School District Facilities Administration, and then they communicate with their high school staff.
Thank you.
Cheryl?
I wanted to ask, how long has the SPR rubber been utilized, and also the Nike grind? For how many years?
So the SBR has been around since the most current series of generations of infield synthetic turf. So nominally 1998 or so was the first infield field installed with crumb rubber. That's sort of the start of the most recent generation, and that's when we went away from short pile, bright green AstroTurf fields to a longer pile infilled fiber with crumb rubber. So nominally since 98, 99, the first field that we installed on the high school campus was replacement of the field in 2004 for the school district, and that was the previous generation of field that was just replaced this summer.
What I meant was, how long has the coated SBR?
Oh, the coated SBR, I'm sorry.
And also the Nike
Sure.
grind?
Nike grind has been around in some limited forms for about 5 years. I will say that it started as a supplemental marketing effort by a tennis shoe manufacturer just to support and encourage development of synthetic turf fields, and they became Nike fields. And so it was not a full column of the Nike grind, but it was more the topping layer, if you will, over the top. So that's been in the 5, 6, 7-year range. Coated rubber has been around similar. My first field I did was in 2009, so it was probably around a year or so before that. So nominally about 7 or 8 years.
Yes.
Can you tell us why Issaquah went with the number 2 and Lake Washington went with number 1?
Those are good questions. And in fact, Issaquah School District, I don't want to answer for the Issaquah School District or the Lake Washington School District. That would be a little bit too progressive for me. But I was the consultant on all of those fields, both with the school district and both school districts. I think that each district is trying different products from both a performance standpoint and a cost standpoint, and they're looking this as kind of an evaluative step for both the current spate of replacement fields and looking forward to the future. We've done 2 Nike fields with the Issaquah School District, and we've done 2 coated rubber fields for the Issaquah School District. So they're just trying some different products. The Lake Washington School District felt enough concern about straight SBR when we replaced the field at the stadium, at East Lake High School Stadium. We had 2 options, much the same as the recommendation is to you, to either use Nike grind or to use a coated SBR rubber, and we went with the coated SBR rubber there.
Hank?
Had a question. You mentioned that the lifetime of a field is typically 8 to 10 years. Certainly, if you could delay the replacement of the field for an extra period of time, you amortize the cost and therefore reduce the annual cost of it. How do you know when a field needs to be replaced? Are there objective measures, or is it a rather subjective thing?
There's both. Thank you for asking it. As the fibers wear away, so the fibers start off at 2 1/4, 2.5 inches long. Through use, through UV exposure, through wear, those fibers eventually wear away and get shorter and shorter and shorter. At some point, you have to remove some of the rubber infill so that the field appears to be green, and so that you're playing on both the combination of the fiber surface as well as the infill material. At some point, when you get down to not having enough infill to provide fall protection, that's the kind of the tipping point, where if you don't have enough fall protection and you're not meeting the safety standards from that standpoint, it's time to move to the forefront on the replacement of the field.
Do you want to talk about compaction testing that we do on the fields specifically?
So specifically, there's an ASTM test called a GMAX test, where a weight is dropped on the field in a prescribed series of 10 locations. It is a weight that's dropped 3 times in the same location, and it measures the deceleration of gravity and comes up with a number. And so ASTM has established a field is safe if it tests at less than 200 on a GMAX scale. Those are tested both at installation and more or less every year on a synthetic turf field to monitor the use of it over time. And so that is besides the performance, that's a safety test that is measurable and leads to the potential for the replacement cycle. So.
Okay, Ben.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind the council, we have 3 more items, and we're almost 65 minutes into this particular item, so just a time check for you.
Are they as excited as this item?
They are. I just want to also thank our consultant. This was very informative.
Sure.
Appreciate for the work. And then also our park staff is always staying on top of these issues. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, let's go to item number 2 then. Okay, quick.
And I wondered whether the old field, the uncoated rubber, can that be recycled someplace that we can get some cost recovery from that field?
So, thank you. Depending on the company that does the removal thank you. So, depending on who does the actual removal and replacement, there are 1 or more turf companies that are looking to reclaim and reuse that material. So there is a possibility that what will come out of this field will be reclaimed and go to somebody else's field. It won't come back to here from a timing standpoint and from a product standpoint. There are some other potential uses that we've heard, but the evidence is sort of anecdotal. We've heard that it might be used as a portion of an asphalt road or an asphalt mix, but they're still fine-tuning the mix on that. At least the one when I talked to someone today, it had so much rubber on it when it caught on fire and they couldn't put it out. So that's a certain amount of awkwardness to have your road on fire. But I think that's clearly a fine-tuning of the mix. I've also heard of it being used as an alternate fuel source, also in terms of heating at an asphalt plant to make that mix. There's really not that much of the material in order to have established a viable long-term market yet that has come to the forefront. Maybe over time someone will there usually is somebody clever that will figure out a way something to do with it, but not yet. We've seen it used as a surface mulch on natural turf fields instead of sand. Thank you.
Next, we've got a presentation, Lake Washington STEM School, Big Rock Park Project.
Yes,
City
thank you.
Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to turn it over to our Parks and Recreation Director, Jesse Bunn. Jesse.
Thank you. You know, we've been doing some great volunteer work this past year, but I think one of the projects we're most proud of is our partnership with the STEM students. And Kelly Hildy is here tonight. She's one of our park project managers. This was sort of her vision initially, and she's going to do a quick intro and then introduce the students.
Thank you. So tonight, we have students from the Tesla STEM High School who are here to present their final internship project for Big Rock Park. Before I turn over the presentation, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a background on how we got to today. Last year at this time, I approached the STEM school to see if students would be interested in working on a design-build project at Big Rock Park. I thought this would be a great way for high school students to participate in Phase 1 design, but also to get them involved in building a new community park. The staff at STEM were more than excited and proposed that the city host a student internship program. So I worked with staff to develop a description, project goals and objectives, and a schedule. To apply, students had to submit a letter of interest telling us why they wanted to work with the city and what skills they could offer to make it a success. I wasn't sure what the interest would be and was completely surprised when we had 40 applications submitted. In total, we received 40 applications, and we invited 10 students to participate. Our first meeting was held last February, and over a course of 18 weeks, we met every Wednesday for 3 hours to discuss their project, research ideas, draft concepts, and receive feedback from staff and professionals within the community. I'd also like to mention that none of the students received any academic credit for this project. This was all done on their own time. And in total, they worked 550 volunteer hours on their project, and as you are about to see, produced some really amazing work. So with that, I'd like to introduce Navita Thomas, our student internship project manager.
Thank you, Kelly, for the wonderful introduction. I'm now going to introduce the team members who were able to make it today. Amy.
Could they stand, please?
Anna. Maya. Sabrine. Sohaib. Ben. And Rishi. Thank you all who were able to make it today. After touring Big Rock Park and meeting with city officials, our internship group decided that there were 4 aspects we really felt passionate about and can go in depth. These are stream restoration, interpretive signage, solar panels and electric charging stations, and the environmental education programs. We split our 10-person group into subcommittees to research and develop these components and ensure we were providing a quality product for generations to utilize. Our meetings took place once a week for 3 hours, where we had experts in the field come in to educate and critique components we were working on at that time. In addition to developing our components at the research level, we participated in a number of events around Sammamish and Redmond to get the word out about our project and get community feedback. The events included the Farmers Market, the Tesla Showcase, and the Parks Commission meeting. I'm now going to present our first project component, habitat restoration. Habitat restoration really focused on finding the right fit. There are a lot of aspects that need to be considered when repairing a riparian zone. To make sure that we were taking all of these into account, we did an initial topography of the land, categorization of stream velocities, and inventory of existing plants. After initial research and input from planting experts, especially LB Jones, our volunteer coordinator, a design plan was constructed and plant orders were placed to the lowest bidder. The decided day for planting will be November 21st, when an entirely volunteer-led work party will be executing the designs that our habitat restoration group developed. If you want to sign up, please visit the Sammamish website. The next component that I will be presenting is interpretive signage. To showcase the importance of habitat restoration in a riparian zone, a group worked to design an interpretive sign that provided educational content. The interpretive signage was probably the most artistic aspect of our project. The subcommittee wanted to develop a sign that would be easily legible for a park user and provide quick bits of valuable information. In that sense, the visuals were extremely emphasized. Working with the riparian restoration group, the interpretive signage group developed initial plans to incorporate the new plants into the existing infrastructure at Big Rock Park. The interpretive signage is in the process of being ordered and will be installed on the new central boardwalk prior to the park opening this spring. I will now have my fellow team member, Maya Gupta, present her component of the Big Rock Park internship, solar and EV charging stations. Thank you.
So the next component of our project is to install solar panels and an EV charging station. There's been a rapid increase of electric vehicles in the Sammamish area, and in order to accommodate for this growth, I believe we should have more charging stations to promote an environmentally friendly future. When I discovered that Puget Sound Energy generates electricity using 50% of greenhouse gas emitting sources, I knew that renewable technology needed to be integrated more. I believe that the most easily adopted renewable energy is solar, and even though we have a typically cloudy and rainy environment, I know that solar has been proven to be successful here. I believe that the implementation of a solar power system will spread awareness about renewable technology as well as serve as a sustainable model for future Sammamish parks to adopt. Big Rock Park should represent a seed of change that could be start of a more widespread goal to promote sustainability. We will be locating 2 solar panels at the top of the main kiosk, and the EV charging station will be located at the front beside the disabled parking spot. The EV station will have a dual head system, so 2 cars are able to charge at once. We plan to obtain the system from ChargePoint, which is the same company as the charger we have here at City Hall. We've been working with landscape architects, electrical engineers, and solar experts in order to prepare this design. All electricity generated from the solar panels will go directly to the grid to offset the carbon emissions generated from the use of electricity from the EV station. The total estimate for the EV station and solar panels, including soft costs such as electrical trenching, is about $12,000. In order to receive funding for this project, we have teamed up with Sammamish Friends so we'll be able to submit grant applications. We successfully sent 2 grant applications to Toyota and Honda, and unfortunately, they were both declined. We launched a GoFundMe campaign that peaked at $125 and has remained stagnant since. We are now submitting to an academic competition. If we win this challenge, all proceeds will go to the EV station and the solar panels. All the work and planning has been done, and now it is a matter of funds. And for this academic competition, I've had the pleasure of working with Sabri Mohammed, who's been working on the environmental education component of this internship. Thank you.
So the final component of our internship is the online environmental education program. The project will include, but will not be limited to Big Rock Park. As of now, Sammamish does not have an environmental education facility like the Mercer Slough Environmental Education Center. However, as we observed, educational websites, educational games, and online curriculum is becoming an increasingly integral part of the typical Sammamish elementary school kids' education. The first step we took in developing our curriculum was to consult educators like Siri Nelson, Pam Moore, and we even talked to teachers around the district to really help us determine what makes a good curriculum and how we could effectively engage our target audience. We also looked at the Common Core Learning Standards so we could incorporate that into our environmental education program so the kids could take what they learned in the classroom and expand and build upon this understanding with our program. We created a full program called GeoPlateau. We created a curriculum that bases activities in 4 Sammamish parks: Big Rock Park, Evans Creek Preserve, Soaring Eagle Park, and Pine Lake Park. In order to engage a specific age group, we decided to structure this curriculum in a way that didn't make it look like a bunch of worksheets, like extra homework. We've decided to structure it as more of an adventure, like the story mode of a video game, because that's what kids really like. Each activity teaches an important lesson about the environment, such as earth science, atmospheric science, climate change, renewable energy, and more. Each activity in the park comes with a video tutorial made by us, and a page in their GeoPlateau field guide to record their findings. So you learn a lesson online, and then go out in the real world to one of the parks to apply what you've learned. After all of the activities have been completed, you can either come to City Hall to have your stamp of completion in your field guide or print out a certificate at home for City Hall to stamp. So the kids make all of the tools on their own. The only things that we provide are the online lessons. We're continuing to work on the website with the help of Shelby Upton, the park planning intern, with the goal of launching this website in December. I'd also like to give a huge shout out to Kelly Hildy, who dedicated 3 hours every week for the past 8 months. Thank you so much for your endless enthusiasm and support and for leading us through this internship.
Any questions?
No, I'm just so very impressed with all
Yes.
of what they've done. They come to our Sammamish Friends meeting, and they just blow me away with their enthusiasm and the lack of willingness to fail at one point and stop. They continue to go on and find other ways to get things accomplished. Great job.
You guys are phenomenal. Thank you very much. Every presentation is comprehensive as this young ladies and both gentlemen make. We could be out of here in about 30 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. City Manager. We have our third discussion tonight. This is on park impact fees. Mr. City Manager? you wanna take
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've been talking about upgrading our impact fee programs. We did the transportation impact fee. It was earlier part of this year. That particular update was results of elimination of a couple projects, particularly on the Parkway, and then we included a couple projects from the town center corridor. As a result, transportation impact fee was reduced about roughly $900. And then we wanted to look at our parks impact fee. We knew that the parks impact fee would be higher, partly because when we did the impact fee on the parks, it was 2006, 2008 timeline. We hadn't updated since then, so it was due for update. And our parks director and her staff, along with consultants, we prepared an impact fee program for your consideration. Obviously, we're not acting on it tonight, but our intent tonight is to answer your questions and come back to you with the first reading of the ordinance, hopefully tomorrow, and then we follow up with the second readings perhaps later in November. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our Parks and Recreation Director, Jesse Bond.
Thank you. I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to jump in right now with a couple of introductions. You may recall, some of you, when we implemented the first park impact fees in 2006, we utilized Randy Young as our consultant. Randy is retired, and he said, "I'm firmly retired." So we were fortunate enough to connect with the FCS group, and they have prepared the materials for your consideration tonight. To my immediate right is John Ghilarducci. And sitting next to John is Gordon Wilson from the FCS group. And I'll be turning the presentation over to John here in just a moment. I also want to take a minute to recognize the staff team that's done a lot of the heavy lifting leading up to FCS coming on board. To my left, Susan Cesar. She's one of our project managers in the Parks Department. And also Mike Sugg, who is a management analyst. And he's supposed to be in the city manager's office, but we have him stashed upstairs working on Parks projects.
Yeah, it was supposed to be in my office. Would you please stand up so I see your face, who you are? Thanks, Mike.
He also filled in the transportation.
I know. I think everybody likes Mike, and Mike does a great job. And community development or parks, anytime we have a critical project, Mike is there to help them on anything. Great job, Mike. Thank you.
Absolutely. Just a couple quick history slides, and then we'll get into the actual impact fee update. So as a reminder, Parks Commission, you saw some of these slides a couple weeks ago. Impact fees are collected from developers of new housing. It really, the bottom line is growth paying for growth. So new development is paying for things like new park facilities. Park impact fees are authorized, as you know, by the State Growth Management Act. And there are other impact fees that we collect as a city, right now currently transportation and school impact fees. State law, just a couple of tidbits. You know, the funds we collect for impact fees may only be used to serve new development. They cannot be used to address existing park system deficiencies. So the example I commonly use is if a picnic shelter needs to have a roof replaced, we're not using impact fees for that. If we're building a new picnic shelter, that would certainly be eligible for impact fee use. The city must contribute to the cost of new park development, so not all new development is borne by impact fees. And we have to expend the fees that are collected within 10 years. Our history, I mentioned, and as did our city manager, we adopted our first impact fees in 2006. At that time, Randy Young and Henderson Young and Associates completed a detailed rate study and also developed our impact fee formula. We had a minor amendment in 2013. We made a one-time inflationary adjustment, and we also made a change to the ordinance to reflect the ability to expend the funds over 10 years. And then another amendment in 2014 related to the affordable housing exemption. So we have not done a major fee update really since 2006. So here we are in 2015, and I will let you know the formula remains unchanged. So the work we did in 2006, we've simply updated the inputs. And really importantly, you're going to see in a minute, this update reflects the investments that we have made in the park system since 2006. The value of the park system has changed, if you will. And we've also taken into account other things that have changed, like our population. I will also mention that this update includes Klahani, both Klahani Park itself, the value, and the population of Klahani. The effect of doing so actually brings the impact fee down. But it was the right thing because they will be part of our community in just a few short weeks, actually. Level of service. I should have noted here that our level of service standard is identified in our Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan that we last updated in 2012, which is an appendix to your comprehensive plan. So our level of service standard is based on investment per capita. So in plain English, we take the whole value of our park system and divide it by population, and that tells us what our level of service standard is. So then once we know the cost per person, we basically apply that to future growth, and that's how we calculate our impact fees. There's a few more steps in there. It's not quite that simple, but that's the general concept. So the first step in calculating the impact fee is really defining the value of our park system. In 2006, we estimated the value of our park system at almost $46 million. In 2015, we're estimating the value of our park system closer to $162 million. This includes the data from the 2006 study, so that was our starting place, right? We did a whole valuation exercise then. We've also added in all of the park investments since 2006. That's our new parks, park improvements, so where we've actually made an investment by building a park or other types of improvements, and land acquisition. I also mentioned just a minute ago, this also includes Klahani Park, and the value also includes the community and aquatic center through the end of August of this year. And present land values, one of the things that we did is certainly the value of the land we owned has changed since 2006. So we did adjust those land values based on the King County Assessor data for Sammamish. Now, there are some places where we did not adjust the land values, and I want to point to that. The preserves in particular, Evans Creek Preserve and Beaver Lake Preserve, the land values were not adjusted or inflated. And that's mostly because those properties are heavily constrained, although certainly the property did appreciate slightly. So in terms of an area of our analysis where we've been conservative, that's one area I'd like to point to. All right, I'm going to hand it over to John from FCS, and he'll pick up from there.
Before John starts, maybe Kathy and Don may remember John. John did our first surface water management study, and they helped us back in 2001. So that was our first surface water utility study that he had completed. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Before my hair was gray.
And mine too, probably. So the, so in order to calculate an investment or value per capita, you need population. So this is the denominator in our calculation. You see how much Sammamish has grown since 2006. That's about a 50% growth, including Klahani, of almost 40,000 to over 60,000 in current population. Substantial growth in the last decade. So dividing that population into the total value of Sammamish parks gives us our value per capita. That's that $2,697 you see there. Again, you see the comparative number. It's gone up more than double. It's important to note as we look at this, that this is the investment required to sustain the current service level into the future from all sources, not just impact fees. So the next step, in order to figure out how much money in total is needed to be invested in parks to serve the growth that's expected, we need to know what the growth is, or at least we need to choose a forecast for growth. So we had three options here. Historical growth has been pretty robust, as you see in the top row there. There's also the 6-year growth target from the comprehensive plan as the third option there. We chose the middle one, which is consistent with the transportation impact fee study. Less than 2% per year. That's the addition of about 6,600 in population in the next 6 years. So we take that anticipated growth, multiply it by our required investment per capita to arrive at the investment needed for growth. And you see that on the right-hand side of this table. You see the investment per person or per capita times the forecasted growth gives us $17.8 million in needed investment in parks, again, to sustain the current service level over the next 6-year period. We have a couple of adjustments to make, deductions to this basis to account for other sources of revenue shown here. And these are adjustments we have to make by law. One of the things when we know outside sources that will help us pay for these parks, we have to deduct that. So you have a YMCA contribution, a known contribution of $2.4 million. We deduct that. We also deduct in step 2 what the city will commit to funding out of non-impact fee sources. So these are other sources of revenue, general fund revenues, if you will, other sources that the city will commit to building parks. REIT's part of it, yes. Although there are other objectives for REIT in addition to the parks plan. So in 2006, the commitment the city made from outside non-impact fee sources of funding was 3.23%, which at the time was consistent with the transportation impact fee. For this study, we're assuming 5%, and so that, again, is a commitment the city makes to non-impact fee sources of revenue. After those deductions, the cost basis in the upper right-hand corner of this table goes from the $17.8 million to a little over $14.5 million. Divided by, again, our projected population growth, you see the cost per capita now a little less than $2,200. Now, this is closer to what will be the impact fee contribution to the capital plan, although we'll make one more adjustment. First, we convert this to per dwelling unit charges. The impact fees are charged per dwelling unit based on the occupancy, average occupancy by type of dwelling. So for single-family residences, you see occupancy has actually gone up slightly. Multifamily as well. Based on those occupancy rates, the single-family park impact fee, with one more adjustment still to make, $6,787. Per dwelling unit for multifamily, $4,393. The final adjustment that we make is to, well, we talked about the 5% that the city will commit to paying out of non-impact fee revenue. We also have to make a deduction for those same non-impact fee revenues that growth will pay over the 6-year period. So that's that final revenue credit of $48 against the $6,787. That is an allowance we make so that growth isn't double charged, basically, in the impact fee, and then again in its contribution to other revenues that will help pay for parks projects. So the resulting single-family residential impact fee you see there, $6,739. For a multifamily dwelling unit after a similar adjustment, $4,362. Here's how those resulting charges compare to both the 2006 calculation and the current charges, which were adjusted, I think, once for essentially inflation in 2013. So the percentage increases are shown there and resulting average annual increases to get to that point, or those 2 points, I should say. We have some comparables for you here. I'll caveat these first by reminding you all that everybody's needs and systems are different and their service levels are different. So it makes sense that we're really looking at apples and oranges here, but I know that the comparables are of interest. So you see how Sammamish compares now and would after the increase. We're looking at 2015 fees for those other communities too. We don't know if their fees will go up for 2016. So that's the single-family residential change, and then multifamily per dwelling unit shown here. Not quite as much of a leap comparatively.
This is the one that I'm going to jump in to talk to you a little bit about that perhaps implementation part of this. And you have heard already comment from our dear friend from Master Builders, Mr. David Hoffman. And I mean it, that David has been a good partner for us to work with, that anytime we have a critical issue, that they are one of our stakeholders, and we sit down and talk with them to understand the potential challenges associated with whatever the initiatives that the council wants to implement. But before I get to that, let me zoom out a little bit. People come to this community for the same reasons that we came, for quality of life. Quality of life consists of many things, many factors. Clearly, parks and open space are on top of that list. At least when we asked those agencies who ranked us about the most livable cities and places, they definitely consider the public safety, the schools, and the parks and open space in that category. So it is imperative for us to maintain our current level of services. I have to tell you that you used to put, for example, your REIT money into opportunity to purchase some properties, open spaces. We stopped doing that a few years back because then you were running short on the capital side of the projects and you're putting that money. I want us to hopefully get back to where we used to be. Those lands are gone. Once they're gone permanently. You cannot get those spaces back, especially in the light of that there's some major projects that we're talking about, particularly on the east side of the city, that the major trail connections, Emerald Necklace. We need those funds. We cannot continue to take those REIT funds and totally fund the capital projects. So it is imperative that we do update our parks impact fee. It is imperative that we continue to upgrade and update our parks, and it is equally imperative that we continue to purchase those open spaces. Think about it, the 41 acres that we purchased here in the Sammamish Commons. That 9 acres, the first phase, the 21 acres, I think 9 acres was 1999, thanks to the founders and mothers of the city, where City Hall is located. Then we purchased the 21 acres that directly kitty corner to here. And then we purchased subsequent to that another 16 acres here. Had we not purchased those properties at the time we did, and you guys know how much the camp property went for sale, it would have been impossible for us to purchase if they were even available to purchase these pieces. So that is the critical component of this thing. Now, there is no statutory requirement for you to phase in. State law gives you a broad legislative prerogative that you can implement the impact fees, and nobody vests into the impact fees. Impact fees are paid at the time you get the building permit. As Mr. Hoffman stated in his public comments, that you don't vest the impact fees. State law is very clear on that one. But I also know that you tend to be very wise and reasonable in your implementation strategies, at least in the past. As a matter of fact, this city was the first city in the state of Washington that allowed developers to do the deferred impact fee payments. Because of that, I think the state legislators changed the state law right now. It's making it mandatory that the all cities, even though Don and I provided testimony to some of our colleagues that we like what we did here, but we don't want the state to mandate for how the other cities do it. But nonetheless, it worked for us. We think that it will work for the other cities too. There are some plats. These folks bought the land, did the construction loans, did their financing, based on our current impact fee, which is $2,697, and for a single family, and then the $1,558 for the multifamily. Proposed increase is about roughly $4,000 on the single family site, and then about the $3,500 on the $3,800 on the multifamily side. I would suggest that you consider phased-in approach for this fee implementation. Now, that only affects roughly, according to my notes from my staff, there's about 200 lots that have been platted, and they have either completed their final plat or at the almost within about a week or so the completion of their final plat approvals. And so that's one part that I want to get into a little bit more specifics of what phasing that you might consider doing it. There's another small part that you might want to consider to exempt them. These are the mom and pop type of short plats, and then this individual home builders. They already signed a contract. I'm a builder, Hank is the buyer, he's got the land. I signed a contract, said this is a $10 what I'm going to charge you. Now this will be above and beyond that contract amount. There's about 31 of those lots in the system. If those builders, 31 lots.
Short plots.
The buildable lots. There's about the 2, 4, 5 short plots, roughly about 31 lots consist of.
I'm sorry, can you repeat again, 31 lots?
5 short plots. Which equals to, and one final plat. Each 5 short plats consist of 14 lots.
Instead of 31?
Yes. I just mixed one final plat. I'm not talking about final plat, I'm talking about short plats right now here. If these folks can demonstrate to us by providing a copy of the contract that they signed, and it's actually predating the implementation date of our impact fee, that you should consider perhaps not increasing the fees for those. Again, in the system-wide, I have already 1,000 buildable lots in the system, so we're talking about a very small percentage of this thing. In terms of the other 200, approximately 200 lots, they don't have a contract. Assuming they don't have a contract, they already went through preliminary plat process, and they're about either completed the final plat or about to complete the final plat process. I would urge you to consider phase-in approach. implement the 70% of the fee increases at the time of the ordinance adoption, and then perhaps do the two steps, one at 85%, one at 100%, and give it 6 months intervals. So total implementation, big chunk, 70% of the increase, not the total fee, 70% of the total increase impact fee when the ordinance is adopted.
That's 60 days after the council approves it?
No, I'm going to suggest that you do it immediately, but we can have some discussions on that one. And then the 85%, do it by July 1, 2016, and make it 100% January 1, 2017.
Can they pay the fee anytime?
They can pay the fee anytime they pull the building permit. That includes obviously other fees too.
So you can't pay it in advance?
No. But let me check onto that one, see if there's any restriction in our ordinance.
Kathy?
Ben, I perfectly understand the 31, or whatever the number was. If a contract has been signed, obviously we'd be creating a loss for someone. However, I don't understand the 200. I understand that the builders have gone out and got financing, but if they have yet to sell the homes, they can adjust the price of the homes upward to cover the fee. And I remember Mike Miller once sitting down and talking, we used to have lunch periodically, and he said, if you raise those fees, he said, we aren't going to be able to sell any more homes here in Sammamish, we'll have to go to Redmond. And I said, good, but on the other hand, he was, he hasn't stopped building here since then. So I guess I'm a little, again, very comfortable not creating a loss on someone's part. Councilmember Witten brought up earlier, what if we deferred the payment of the fee until such time as the property was sold? Can we then collect 100% of the fee because the property can be adjusted? So to me, it's two very distinctive things. One is a cash loss. One is, and I'm not quite sure if they have already sold some of the homes, because I do see a lot of sold signs long before homes are being built. And I don't want to cause a problem there. So if we had contracts there, I'd be very comfortable, deferring some of this. But I'm not as comfortable just simply deferring it for a time period just because.
And it's an excellent discussion topic. And Councilmember Witten came up with one suggestion, obviously. That's what we're having the study sessions. I thought so that too, Kathy, they could pass the price on top of the homes that have not been sold. Then I did talk with some of the folks that are expert in this field that they determine the price of the homes based on the market. So in essence, that those 200 lots, that they determine the price, and then they did their calculations accordingly. That's the reason I said that we might want to consider doing the phase-in approach. But that's perfectly legitimate point that you raise.
Nancy?
Going back to my point, thank you, Kathy. I want to be fair to everybody in this situation and not create a hardship. But I don't feel like giving away something to the development community by phasing in the full amount. I would much rather defer the payment of the full amount or part of it. For example, have half the fee due upon a permit issuance and then half the fee due upon sale. We've taken that approach with some, I think with our impact fees that you mentioned with the downturn. We were very concerned about the hardship on the development community. We found a fair way to come about it, and we've taken a lean on that, so we're already doing that type of thing. So I'm very much in favor of a deferral to make it possible to pay without hardship. But again, I don't want to lose the money for the city coffers. I don't think it's fair for, they've always known that it's due at time of permit issuance. I don't think it's fair to create different fees for these different lots. So equal protection basically, to me, says you treat people equally. So giving them a deferral will accomplish the fairness part of it, and it will mean that the city will still be getting
the full amount of the fees, but at the convenience of the developer if they want to defer, say, like half of it.
But you're okay with the ones that signed the contract, purchase and sales contracts?
On the what?
The small number of the lots we're talking about?
I don't have, if you're talking 15 lots, I'm not going to create a hardship on that one. But I'm talking about everybody else. I would want to see it deferred rather than waived.
Ramiro?
Yeah, thank you. You know, the philosophy of our city, as was mentioned earlier, has always been growth pays for growth. That said, however, the numbers that are jumping here from 2,697 to 6,739 are off the charts, and especially when we start to look at the other fees for traffic impact that we've been having, the transportation impact, and the schools haven't been anywhere near in this magnitude to it. So that's something that we have to take into account as we're looking at this. I think we also have to be looking at the consistency and as people are doing their planning here and working with Sammamish, but our philosophy has always been growth pays for growth. That said, I'm wondering about the level of services. I understood the level of service is based upon, is this correct, the total value of all of our parklands, which in 2015 update was what, 162,376,000, divided by our population, including the welcome cousins from Sammamish that are now part of our family here. But then that also assumes, when we started the city, we were at 40-some acres of parkland, and now we're at 558 acres of parkland. So we've had a tremendous growth in that. And that would assume then that same level of growth would be taking place. And I'm all for the acquisition for the Emerald Necklace, but is that a fair standard to put on when we went from 40-some acres to 558 acres to the future, particularly since Klahani, I'm told, has just one park, and we're not going to add anything there? Do we have that kind of growth that's really going to take place?
Frankly, I use that for the real estate excise tax revenue. So you have flexibility, whatever you want to do. The ordinance that we passed, that Ramiro, it's 25%. Half of the real estate excise tax goes to transportation, half goes to the parks. What I was pointing out to you, the fact that if you don't have the growth to pay for itself, you are going to reduce your level of services in over time that we had experienced that here. Every year, 2010, budget 2010, we started 2012 actually. Till then, we had a designated fund in our budget in the Parks Department for opportunity to purchase the land.
Understand?
We got rid of that one. That is imperative. I can't tell you that how many acres is out there available. What I can tell you, however, acreage-wise, we may not be able to do it. But the cost-wise, that we will be able to do it. And that cost is going to go higher in the future. If we don't do it, it will go higher in the future. But don't mix that with this impact fee. These are capital parks improvements that we have to do per City Council approved pro plan and 6-year capital improvement plan. I'm looking at the staff back there. So this is not taking into consideration at this juncture with this fee schedule is about the land acquisition. Land acquisition, I'm pointing out to you the fact that we need to bring that back to the focus. That is a critical fact of building a good community, great Sammamish here. We cannot ignore that aspects of our parks and open space budget.
Ben,
But
can I?
to that land acquisition, that's where I guess where I'm going to, because the parks plan, which we last reviewed, and the location of our parks, said that there might only be one potential place in the northeast corner of our city that needed a park. Yet if you went by the half-mile to a mile radius, even that was in question. So taking out parks, I understand the land acquisition piece for the Emerald Trail and supportive of it. I'm just trying to figure out the value of what we're looking at of our parklands is based upon an increase of parklands that went from 40-some acres to 558. And is it realistic that we're going to have that same type of growth? I understand we're going to be buying some more for it, but if we don't have places to put parks, given our park plan that's already been discussed, and we're not gonna go through 15-fold increase. That's where I guess I'm getting hung up on.
I think that Jesse wants to jump in.
Sure. So one of the, and feel free to jump in here, John. One of the tests we do as we're working through the fee study is to look out to our park CIP and identify how many projects we have in the future that are growth-related projects. So we did that test. We can't set a fee higher and collect more money than we have growth projects identified. We have over $17 million between now and the end of our 2021 CIP that's earmarked for growth-related projects. That is a CIP that has not been updated yet. It will be coming to you in 2016 to be reevaluated and updated. If you add things in like land acquisition, those are impact fee eligible expenditures, as are trail development projects. We are just starting work on our trails plan update that's been lying somewhat dormant since 2004. Constructing trails and working on that piece of our park system and transportation system will require land acquisition as well. So we did that test. I think you have, and that's only what's in your CIP. That's not even what is not been identified by the council. Is that fair? Ben, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, it is. And again, I use that land acquisition as a metric to keep our standards going forward. One standard that we have dropped. I'll be the first one to confess. We have dropped. We need to get back to that. Now, in terms of whether it's a 400 acre available with the amount of the money, REIT money that we can put there, or it's a 40 acres available, I suspect it's probably less of an acreage will be available going forward, Ramiro. But I also suspect that some of the critical acreages will be available, whether it's the Emerald Necklace, whether it's missing links in the couple trail connections, whether it's in the waterfront park that you got some private properties that splitting your waterfront parks. I don't know. But those are critical parts of our open space and park plans and a part of the quality of life going forward in our community.
Ben?
John, our consultant wants
Sure. Just the one thing I would add is, just as a reminder, the level of service that we're working with here is not an acreage level of service. It is a dollar investment level of service. And so what we're saying is that you will be making an equivalent investment, might not be land acquisition, part of it might be, but an equivalent investment in parks to the current service level you're providing now.
But the current one is based upon now 558 acres plus the investment. And if I understand you correctly, you're saying we won't be going as quickly on the acreage, but we will be going heavier on the capital investments into these projects.
Well, and it doesn't really speak to the growth. It says that what you are providing now is what you will provide into the future. So however we got where we are now, that's the service level that the city will provide into the next 6 years at least.
I mean, the fee is 2016. We're taking the facts of 2015 as of August.
Right.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think one way of looking at it is when we incorporated, we were very deficient in infrastructure. And now we may be saying that, hey, we're at a level that we have a good level of service for our existing citizens, and we want to keep that level of service. And in order to keep that level, this is what we have to invest. Excuse me. I've got it, but it's not helping. And I'm comfortable with that. What troubles me is when government changes the rules once a person or a company starts the process. And it happened to the real estate investors back in 1986. The federal government, before that, the federal government said, we need more affordable housing. How are we going to do this? Why don't we give some incentives to developers? So they structured incentives so that people could invest their ordinary income into investments in real estate and write that off against the capitalized amortized loss. And then in 1986, they suddenly passed a law, and they didn't phase it in. They passed a law that said you can no longer do that. And so a lot of people that were structured in investments where they were writing off ordinary income against depreciation losses were out in the cold. That's the sort of thing I don't like to see government do. And that's what, you talked about fairness, Nancy. That's not fair to change the rules after someone's in the game. Here we have rules set up, and the rules said that the fees were so much.
The rule is that it's past the time of
The rules,
issuance.
yes, but you didn't,
But that's the rule.
but if you, Nancy, if you know the rules, and then the government says, okay, yes, we can change the rules on you anytime, you still expect it to be a gradual change. So I consider it unfair to do that, and I would support a phased-in, say 70%. I was thinking more of 50% now and 70% in July of next year. So I support the phased-in and not the deferred full payment.
Councilmember Keller?
My first question is, the YMCA property, the YMCA property in the south end of the city, we at some point are looking at possibly purchasing that, is that correct?
What was your question, Ed?
The YMCA property that's down by Beaver Lake Middle School.
Actually,
I
we're
played in
not,
high school.
we have an agreement with
Yes,
them
sorry.
as part of the community center agreement that we have the use right, so we don't actually need to outright purchase it. So it is, we need to come up with the master plan at the end of next year. And that master plan, we got to go through the community process, and whatever the council decides that we need to develop, whether it's the indoor soccer field or indoor soccer field. Whatever the council decides to build there. That cost has not been factored into this at all. It's not in our CIP. All we have is in our CIP is just a preliminary planning process that we have to go through it. But we don't have to purchase the property from them.
Okay, one other thing. What I find troubling of sorts is not the contract. I think that people that have actually gone through the contract process, I think they, waiving or not assessing the fee is really appropriate. Where I think we've missed it as a city that introduces something that Councilmember Jaron is pointing out is we should be increasing this on a more frequent basis. We shouldn't be going from 2006 or 2000 and, it was it, well, it was 10, we did a cost of living or kind of just a COLA adjustment on it. We really should be looking at this on a more frequent basis so that we don't go from a $2,500 fee to a $6,000, $6,500 fee. That's what's really troubling, and that's why I would really want to look at phasing in a little bit to see if there's some point of fairness that we should look at because of the length of time that we've gone without increasing this. And I would really suggest that we put a time frame in the future, that we look at this, if not every year, every 3 years, or every 6 years when we're reevaluating it, but sooner. And so the expectation is there.
Kathy?
Yes. First of all, let's not forget a couple of things. We have wonderful parks in this city. This is what attracts a lot of people here. This is what allows the developers to charge $800,000, $900,000 for homes because we have parks. Let me finish. We have a capital list that we have to provide to pay for the new projects coming in. We've heard tonight that, gosh, you're charging us too much for the use of fields, but if you could build more fields, we would rent every one of them that's out there. We don't have anything in the capital budget to solve or to address some of those issues. And let's not forget that the increase is about $4,000. And where the homes have not been sold, there's no reason, these are pass-through fees. They will just increase the cost of the homes that are being purchased here. It's not coming out of the developer's pocket. Very different than the analogy that Don Jaron was comparing to, where the federal government made a change and there was no opportunity to say, oh, okay, now I'm going to sell my real estate for more money. It was worth less because of the tax changes. So for many reasons, there seems to be, in my mind, no purpose to delay the fee. And I think Councilmember Whitten had come up with an excellent thought about deferring the payment, because once they collect the money from the property owner, as opposed to the building permit where it's coming out of their pocket ahead of time, they would have the cash to be able to pay that.
Councilmember Odell?
Thank you. There's several things I need to respond to here. First of all, our land acquisition budget per the Park CIP is in the packet is $2 million. That is not a tremendous amount. It's about roughly 5% of the whole budget. Secondly, the undeveloped land that's been acquired over time, per what we just heard, has not been jacked up and escalated in price anywhere near to the same amount as a finished facility has. So I'm not terribly concerned about that. I do feel open space is a priority for the city for the future as much as building another ball field is. Perhaps more, because as Ben said, once it's gone, it's gone. And frankly, I would like to see, in addition to everything Ben rattled off, I would add purchase of Ebright Creek watershed, Secuse Creek watershed, Pine Lake watershed, et cetera, so that we can keep the kokanee around this town for the foreseeable future. As far as the phase-in issue goes, what I thought I heard David Hoffman say at the outset was, in his remarks earlier tonight, was that he wanted a deferral of until February 1st of the implementation. That or a phase-in, but not both. Okay. And I heard the phase-in being a much shorter time than we're talking about here. Perhaps another thing that should be thrown into the equation is the issue of the deferral of the payment. Effectively, by deferring payment of the impact fee to the end, we're allowing the use of the money for whatever period of time. When we had this discussion to begin with several months ago, maybe years ago at this point, I was in favor of charging an interest rate on that deferral. Well, we didn't do that. But I do think that's another element we need to think about in our discussions here. If the net impact is that the price of a house in another city, which might be $425, is $850 in Sammamish for the same house, same size lot, that's basically reflective of market forces. And it's reflective of the fact we have a darn good community here. If it keeps somebody from building another house up here, yeah, I'm not sure that's necessarily a net loss. As far as the stuff that's already in the pipeline, so to speak, your financing's been set up, et cetera, I do believe that those people need to be taken into consideration. Perhaps they get grandfathered in, or they get offered the option of paying the lower impact fee now, or if they want to defer, then they pay a higher impact fee.
Councilmember Romero?
I appreciate all the comments that have been made. It's interesting. I've noticed that all of our council members have spoken, and I'd like to hear from the commissioners and the voice of the people, that what you've been hearing from the people, so that Hank, Doug, Nancy, Lorraine could also pipe in as to your reactions.
I'd love to start. I wanted to interrupt off and on here. I'm sure you could feel me going, oh, I want to talk. I've really enjoyed going over to the new developments and talking to the real estate people there. What they tell me is that a developer will build and ask a price. And if the houses sell, then they'll build again and ask a higher price. So it really, I think, well, it is a big jump, and while we should be looking at this, reviewing it every 2 or 3 years, I don't think a $4,000 increase is too much. I think people can easily pay that. All right. In terms of parks, people move here for our parks. They are the jewel of this city, as we all know. We need more of them. We need more open space, because even though it costs more now, we will all reap the benefit of it in the future, and we will look back and say, oh, we did something right. So please, let's go out and get more parks and invest in the parks we have. Keep our city just shining and beautiful.
Cheryl, you want to?
I want to echo Lorraine's comment that, for example, when I was at Klahani with the annexation celebration, folks were just thrilled that they were going to be able to be involved with our park system and what we had to offer them. And I think it's imperative that we have the ability to provide parks to people that live here. It keeps sanity. As we see more people moving in, the lots are getting smaller. Folks don't have that open space to go out and walk in. I volunteer at eBright often doing native plant steward work, and I see so many folks coming of all different backgrounds, walking every day through that park with their children, older people, and they just love being out there, and that's why they're here. So I really urge you to move forward with this.
I guess I would say that I feel, along with Don, that maybe some kind of a phasing would work, but let's keep in mind that if growth doesn't pay for growth, if growth doesn't pay for our pro plan, current residents are going to pay for it. So that's I think an important thing to keep in mind here, that this is about growth paying for growth. And so I would just stop there. Doug, you wanted to say something?
Sure, I'm a third-generation Californian. I know people.
Bob, can you pass your mic? Oh, you don't hold it on the record.
I'm a third-generation Californian, and developers ruin California. And I think we can learn something from that experience. And I've been in this community since 1986. And as you all know, I've worked hard to try to build the infrastructure in this community, almost 25 years on the school board, and trying to make sure we have adequate schools. And that's been a struggle, even with impact fees. So again, as the mayor indicated, growth needs to pay for growth. And I'm not an economist, but I do have a sense that the market is able to bear, particularly in this community, the market can bear the increase, in terms of the fees. And I might add that, as other people have indicated, the value of the property has also increased tremendously. So it's not as if we're putting this undue burden on a bunch of poor consumers.
Hank.
If we assume that the average home in Sammamish sells for $800,000, a $4,000 increase represents, correct me if I'm wrong, mathematicians, half of 1%.
That's correct.
Increase. And I'd be surprised if someone is looking to purchase an $800,000 house, says, $805,000, I don't think I can afford that. And I mean, simply, I could see it if the increase was much higher than that, but half of 1%, people don't dicker over that amount when they're coming to purchase a house. And so I don't see that this is, as Doug said, I don't see it as a burden, a significant burden to a potential homeowner who's going to be this cost will be passed on to them.
Don?
The point is, when the developer works out a project, he determines what the market is as best he can. Now, if he's marketing it at $4,000 below market, why doesn't he increase the price now before the fee is increased? He's at what he thinks he can sell it at. So you don't say that you'll just pass the fee along. That isn't the way it goes. By the way, the the REIT, 0.5% of REIT is another 4,000 that gets collected at the sale of that new house. So that goes into, by the way, I do support what Ben is saying about using the REIT for buying new parkland and new easements. It's a great idea.
Nancy?
All these arguments about not passing the thing along, I think are pie in the sky, because I think the market prices go up, which they often do. They go into a project and get their financing 2 or more years before they're getting to a permit issuance stage. And they're projecting into the future what they expect the market to do. They're going to adjust their prices regardless, based upon what the house will sell for at the time of sale. And in this real estate market, they've gone up like this. I can tell you, my property went up, one of my lots went up 30% in 1 year, according to the assessor. I think that, I don't know what the average rate was, I think there's a problem there, but they're going to increase the price if it goes up. And so their market price allocation, I think, is an estimate only. And I think they can get more, if they can get more on the sale, if the market's gone up, they're going to charge more.
If it keeps going up.
Well, yes, but if it doesn't, then we can readjust our fees. I mean, I'm looking for fairness, but, you know, if you compare that 4,000 to the 800,000, or even, let's say, 600,000, it's a drop in the bucket compared to everything else, you know, and it's, you give them the time to pay it, and the market's there. I just think, and that's one of the things that helps make the market are our parks. So I think parks are critical, and if you looked at our proposed projects, I think our master planning for all of our parks is overstated by what we can afford by a long shot. Even Big Rock Park had a price tag on it of so many millions that we couldn't afford in the later phases. Same thing with the waterfront park. Every park, Beaver Lake Park, we have 29 acres to develop at Soaring Eagle. That's a lot more than the 17 million. If you added those numbers up, I bet you'd be well into the hundreds of millions. So I think 17 million of it is really a very small part to keep the quality of what we have, hopefully. And so I'm really not buying into the argument.
Councilmember Keller, and then finally Lorraine.
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize that I don't have a
Then
problem
Nancy.
with the fee. I think that what the fee is appropriate, and the way it was calculated was very conservative. I don't think I'm hearing anybody saying that they don't think that's a good fee. And I'm hearing everybody pretty much say that we want parks, and it is a great amenity for a city and a reason why people are here. I think that Councilmember Witten's suggestion of putting off the fee until later is really that's a fair idea. The contracts, as I said, somebody that already has done this, that already has signed a contract, that's one thing. But I hear a lot of people talking about real estate. I don't profess to be an expert in real estate, but we talk about passing on the price. But if interest rates go up 0.25%, 0.5%, prices come down. And we're talking about $800,000 homes, and there are $400,000 and $500,000 homes in Sammamish. We have communities that young people want to move, or individuals want to move into our city, and that $4,000 or $5,000 may be the difference between them qualifying for their loan or not. I'm sure. I'm just saying that the money it's easy to say that it doesn't mean much, but it might. It might not. To an $850,000 person, it's a different perspective than a smaller house or a condominium that we have in our city. It's just, I think we're speculating a lot, and all we're really talking about is the implementation. Nobody's arguing about how much it's going to be in the long run or how it's valued. It's really just at when do you start it? When do we actually implement it?
Okay, I have a couple more, and then I'm going to let Ben sum up. Lorraine, you wanted to say something?
Yes, you asked about community sense, and I don't have a sense here, but would guess that if people knew that fees are being deferred without interest paid, they'd go, that's a good deal. Because anything I ever owe to the government, I have to pay interest on. So maybe we should start being more like the federal and state government and start asking for interest. The other is phasing in. I'm sort of with Nancy on that, and I think there would be quite a bit of community opinion thinking that we really don't need to phase that in.
Nancy Way, did you have something to say?
I was going to echo Bob's comments.
Okay, thank you. Ben? Oh, Sid first.
I think just one thing to mention is they've already, the developers have offered the phasing in at 70%. So we're really just talking about that last 30%. Are they able to absorb that $1,200 about? And I think that's not really unreasonable. We're not talking about that $4,000 gap. They've said, okay, you know what, we can eat that 70%. It's just that last 30%. So I think that's not, I mean, I don't know as much about this as, I don't think anyone else, but that doesn't seem.
That's not necessarily true.
That doesn't seem overburdensome. They've said we can absorb 70%. I suspect with the scale of the numbers we're talking about, they can absorb that last 30% without any real impact.
Yeah. To be fair, Sid, the development community, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they would not prefer any increases, obviously. So, but they were reluctantly considering it in agreement to say the 70%. If I may close, what I'm hearing is there is unified agreement that fee needs to go up, and then you understand how it's being done, and you're okay with it. And in terms of the council member Keller's comment that we built in the ordinance some of the periodic updates, at least it needs to be updated with the construction index every year, that it needs to be automatic increases there. You have some difference of opinion in terms of how you want to implement this thing, so that needs to be still discussed perhaps among yourself. My suggestion is, this was a very fruitful discussion and good ideas came out of it, and in terms of the council member Whitten's suggestion that deferring the collection to the sale of the home. There's a logic behind that, because the sale of the home is when you have the impacts, when people move into the home, that they actually start using the parks and so forth. It's actually now required by state law, 1 year effective, I believe, January 2017.
September 1st, 2016.
But he knows the date better than I do, so sooner than that. For us, it's not a big deal. We have already built a system to defer the collection method if that's what the direction that you want to go. But let's do this. I think tomorrow evening, that's the first reading of the ordinance. We open the public hearing. We'll get some more public comments on this thing. And let's just promise ourselves, let's not debate this thing again tomorrow evening, and then we will have a very hot, contested, heated debate on the second reading, which will be scheduled probably in the middle of November. Part of it is my selfish reasons. I'm trying not to be at the council meeting tomorrow night, but that part of it is also your practice that you don't necessarily debate these things on the first reading of the ordinance. Is that okay with you? So we'll do the first reading, open the public hearing.
We had to not having a heated debate tomorrow, or that we.
Both.
Let's have the first reading, and we did have a good discussion tonight, so.
We leave the portion of the ordinance in terms of the implementation part at this juncture blank, so to speak. We fill those blanks after the public hearing.
I was going to ask that staff come to us at the second reading with alternates based
Sure.
on the discussion tonight, so that we're ready to go whichever way the vote goes.
Yeah. You okay with that? Okay, and I want to thank our consultants, I want to thank our Parks Director, and I want to thank Susan, our Parks Project Manager, and I also want to thank that I finally recognize my management intern, City Manager's office, Mike. Hi, Mike, thank you.
I know I saw him over there by your office for a long time.
I'm giving him a hard time, and I'm giving Jesse a hard time too, so. Thank
Okay.
you.
5-minute break.
Let's take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay. We're going to get started on the next topic. We got everybody here almost? We have this is a fairly extensive presentation, and I want to make sure that we get through the presentation before we have questions. So please write down your questions if you have one, and we'll get that to Jessie when the time comes. So I'm going to let her go ahead, or Mr. City Manager, you can introduce Jessie, that's your job.
Fine, let's Mr. Mayor. So, you want to get going?
Yeah, Jessie, you want to go ahead and start again, write down your questions, and we'll do the questions after.
Excellent.
Partly because you may find answer in the subsequent slide.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just take a moment to introduce my teammate sitting next to me. Joanna Martin is our recreation supervisor, and she does a lot of this number crunching for me, so many thanks to her. And Kyle Endelman, our deputy parks director, was also involved in preparing this fee study. It's been quite a while since we took a look at our facility rental fees. My apologies. It's our intent to try to do this every 2 to 3 years, and we will definitely work on getting back on track. So what I'm going to do is just go through the whole presentation and all of the facility categories, and then we can come back, and I'm going to speculate we'll probably spend some time talking about synthetic turf fields in particular. Speaking of, let's start there. So what I wanted to just share with you first, and I believe this is in your packet, is a look at where we are in the market today. Our youth fees are $56 an hour, adults $81.50, and our lights are $20 per hour. We are on the high end of the market, but I would say we're in the market. Usage. Oh, sorry.
In your packet.
We can come back to this if you'd like. So before we talk about the actual fee proposal, I apologize, this is dark. We're going to stop using black backgrounds with the new projector. Usage breakdown by type. So 73% of our field time is for youth. 13% of our time, this is the city portion of the community sports field time, is used by the schools. This is mostly, for example, when at Issaquah, at Skyline, we have a varsity girls softball game that's going to go an hour late. Playoffs is another example. Rainouts get rescheduled. So we do turn back that time. Adult use is at 11%. And the city, we do run some programs on the fields in the summer. That makes up for 3% of field use. So one of the things you heard Council Member Valderrama say earlier is that we're at 90% capacity, and there are times that we hit that. What you're looking at here is a graph of August 2014 through July 2015. The green bars are weekdays, and the gray bars, which are a little tough to see, my apologies, are the weekends. So you can see August, September, October, which is what we consider our fall season, soccer, football. We're at nearly 90% capacity during the weekdays. If we have any field time turned back by the leagues, we usually turn around and rebook it to another league that day. The springtime, February, March, April, we get up into the 80, 90% as well. That would be 100% if we didn't account for spring break. The leagues take those weeks off, and that brings our number down. So if we took those weeks of play out, you'd be maxed at that time as well. So what you're seeing here is this is a curve that's been problematic for us from the beginning, and I don't want to say this in a negative way, but our policy prioritizes youth leagues over adult leagues, and youth leagues have distinct playing seasons where adult leagues often play year-round. Like adult soccer leagues in our area, they play every month of the year. So by doing so, we sort of lock out the adult leagues. So we peak high weekday use, fall and spring, and then we have some off-peak use. So we're having a hard time leveling this curve out, and I think that's just going to be a function of the way our field arrangements are structured. And we can come back and talk about this a little bit more later. Okay, so a little bit about our field use statistics. Average from 2013 to 2015. The available hours, if every single hour were booked on our field, 11,500 hours. This is across all the fields. The total hours actually booked, just a little over 6,000, and the total paid hours just a little over 5,000. So we first did an analysis on just the total hours booked. We took our annual operating costs. This is what it costs for us to operate our fields, almost $132,000. The average rental hours, again, I said that was 6,000. And you divide that, and you get the average maintenance cost per hour is almost $22 per hour. We took then the turf replacement cost. We heard a presentation earlier about infill costs going up, and also the installation of an elastic layer pad. So our turf replacement costs are now approaching 1.4 million. And a few years back when we had this discussion, it was closer to 1 million. Actually, 1.4 million is for the double fields, Skyline and Eastlake, and then the Eastlake field number 3 is a little bit less because it's smaller. Again, you take that 3.6 with no inflation and you divide it by 10 years and 6,075 hours, and our replacement cost per hour is $60, a little over $60 an hour. So you add the two together and you're looking at your hourly cost of maintenance and replacement. It's approximately $82 per hour. Not too bad, but that's based on 6,075 hours of play. If we run that same formula based on the paid hours, this is the money we're actually collecting, and this is one of the reasons why we did the fee update previously. We did not achieve our cost recovery goals. It's because we based our analysis on the total hours booked, not on the total paid hours. So you rerun the same analysis with the input of 5,000 hours, and the maintenance cost per hour is closer to $26 per hour, and the replacement cost is actually closer to $72 per hour, bringing the total cost almost to $100 per hour. Now, one of the policy questions we've had as staff is it fair to burden the paying folks with all the maintenance costs, specifically because, you know, by policy we allow non-paid use of the fields, like giving back to the school and our own city use. So that's something to think about as we move forward. So here's your table and the range, 82 to almost 100 is your break-even cost, again with no inflation. Does anybody need that back? Sorry, I clicked quickly. All right. So then synthetic turf fields, we looked at a couple of the Parks Commission recommendation, and then the staff report here includes 2 alternatives. The Parks Commission is recommending a modest fee increase from $56 an hour to $60 for youth, and from $81.50 to $90 for adults. There's a whole formula behind this table where we calculated the net, first of all, based on maintenance. So this is the net, once you take out maintenance, the money we net on youth, and then the money we net on adult. So before we factor in the replacement cost of the fields, based on the Parks Commission recommendation, we would be making annually a little over $200,000. As you move to the right, you can see the net revenue goes up based on those fee increases. Once we add in, however, the annual contribution to the turf replacement fund, we find ourselves in negative territory. So with the Parks Commission recommendation, we estimate that we would be subsidizing the field operation by almost $152,000 annually, which is a 42% subsidy. The cost recovery numbers are alternate number 3, which is $90 per hour for youth and $120 an hour for adults. Okay, I'm going to keep going. There we go. So we've talked a lot as staff, other things to consider. You know, one of the challenges we have with our fields is that they are shared use fields. So there's a portion of every day during the week that is used by the schools and a portion that's used by us. And we talk all the time, how do we maximize our use? How do we level out that curve? Increasing our marketing efforts. It's not always been our highest priority, but there have been moments and times where we've really pushed fields, pushed field vacancies. And I think we've seen a little uptick, but not significant. We've also talked about lowering the weekend rates. So we're never at capacity on the weekends, and particularly in the evenings from 5 to 9 p.m., we have an opportunity. We didn't work out a fee proposal for you. We wanted to put that out for discussion, but I think that's an opportunity to perhaps increase usage by lowering that rate. We also talked about off-season rates. You know, December and July are slow. December is like a ghost town on the fields. There may be that team, you heard from a gentleman tonight that plays pickup soccer. That may be an opportunity to attract folks like that. And field uses policy change, I'm not sure this is something that we really recommend, but I wanted to just remind you that we do have policies that identify priority use. So again, youth leagues have priority over adult leagues, and leagues have priority over individual users. And there's a whole exercise we go through 3 times a year to schedule the fields. Okay, so again, I just wanted to show this table again. And we can come back to any of this data once I'm through the presentation. Natural turf fields, which is just a fancy name for green grass. Our current fees are $15.50 for youth and $25.50 for adult. We're actually a little bit behind the market in terms of our natural turf fields. We also charge a $40 field prep fee. You know, one of the things I will want to say, just I want to share anecdotally, the last time we raised our synthetic turf field fees, it had the effect of pushing a lot of teams onto the natural turf fields. So I want to be really careful about balancing the fee increase. Our natural turf fields can't handle much more use. So our natural turf fields, how are they used? 85% by youth leagues, not surprising. The city, 11%. Keep in mind, when we hold like the concerts at Pine Lake Park, we are on a field, so we have to reserve it. And adult usage, very, very small. In fact, I think we only have 1 adult league on our natural turf fields these days, and that's 4%. We did a similar analysis for the natural turf fields. Our annual operating costs, based on averages, is about $111,000 for all of our natural turf fields. Average rental hours is about 5,000 hours. You divide that out, and that's $22.07 per hour is the cost. Average paid hours, again, there's that nuance with natural fields as well, excuse me. If you do the math that way, your average maintenance cost per hour is $24.92, almost $25. The one thing I want to note is that capital replacement costs are not included in the calculation, and we don't have a big turf replacement cost that factors into these fields, but we do have other things that come up. It's just tricky to capture those items. One example is at East Sammamish Park, we just installed safety netting. That was definitely a field expense, but it's not quite as predictable as the turf replacement, so it's a little bit more challenging to capture.
Yes.
Yep.
Is that cost inclusive on the turf natural? Is that cost inclusive of water bills,
Yeah.
everything?
Mm-hmm.
Aerating, seeding, maintaining. I mean, last time we did this analysis, I'm not very good with memorizing things, but there was a significant greater differences between the maintenance of turf fields and the natural fields. So let's take a look at these numbers one more time.
Sure. One thing to note is we have more natural turf fields than we do synthetic turf fields. So we have 5 synthetic turf fields. We have 7 natural turf fields.
Okay.
And let me show you this next slide. The cost recovery is significantly different. You know, something else to mention, on a natural turf field, you typically can only play 1 team at a time. The grass just can't hold up to multiple teams. Synthetic turf fields, we play, the leagues often will play 4 teams for practice, you know, 1 in each quadrant. So the way the fields are used is very different. So the Parks Commission recommendation is, again, a modest increase for the grass fields from $15.50 to $17 for youth per hour, and from $25.50 to $30 for adults. You know, I also want to mention that we made an adjustment to all of our fees a couple years ago to account for the credit card charge, and we got away from whole dollars, and it really makes us crazy. So whatever we decide, we're going to ask that you stick with whole dollars. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. The youth revenue, so we did the same exercise. When you take the youth hours and you net out the maintenance costs, and I just have a note here that indicates, Ben, we may not have captured all of our utility bills, so my apology for that staff error. We take a loss on the fields. So we're losing, it's a subsidy of about $40,000 at our current rates. At the proposed increase, it's closer to $33,000. We make a little bit off the adults, the way we calculate this. The net revenue, however, each year is a loss, and our city subsidy is currently about 36%. With a slight increase, we'd be looking at subsidy of 30%. Again, I will emphasize this doesn't include any capital improvements. Okay. So again, I wanted to bring the market slide back up. This would get us, the increase would put us ahead, in market, slightly ahead or almost ahead. Okay, really quickly on the picnic shelters, this will go relatively quickly now. We have 5 picnic shelters, and a couple years ago, we implemented a Tier 1 and Tier 2 type of fee system. So Pine Lake and Ebright Creek, you can see that top row, they're reserved far more than the other shelters, and we charge more for those shelters. So we're recommending continuing with the Tier 1, Tier 2 status. This is a really busy slide to look at. Right now, besides Redmond, we're the only other city that charges non-resident rates for the shelters, and this wasn't part of my memo, but I'm actually curious to get your feedback on possibly discontinuing the non-resident rate, and I'll show you why in a minute. We're currently, I would say, in market, although we have some really, really nice picnic shelters. Usage, the resident usage of our shelters is 94%, non-resident is 6%. And I'll tell you something, if somebody wants to hold a birthday party at Pine Lake Park and they see the non-resident rate, the first thing they do is call a friend that lives here and they come and book the shelter. And I'm not kidding, it happens all the time. Yeah. So based on this, eliminating the non-resident rate would result in a loss of only $500 per year. And the reason I'm even bringing it up is just simplifying our fee schedule really is a customer service issue that I'd like you to consider. The other thing is by policy, residents are able to book picnic shelters in January and non-residents not until March. So you still have a benefit for your residents. Okay. So here's what we're looking at. The proposal is, again, a modest bump on the Tier 1 and Tier 2, and I'm still showing the non-resident rates, although I would, and you can see the non-resident rates are significantly higher. So if you're holding that birthday party full day at Pine Lake Park, you're definitely incentive. There's an incentive to find a friend in Sammamish, right? Okay. A couple more slides. I'm going to move to our indoor facilities now, Beaver Lake Lodge and council chambers. First thing I just wanted to show you is the lodge usage. The pie chart to the left is hours used by rental type. So by far, our nonprofit usage of the lodge exceeds all of their usage. But when you look to the right, revenue by rental type, it's actually kind of neck and neck between weddings and nonprofit use. This pie chart has changed over the years. During the recession, I used to do my department reports and I'd refer to the lodge as being like Little Vegas. We were doing a lot of weddings. But since we've recovered from the recession, clientele have moved back to the hotels and different facilities. So this isn't unusual, but we'd like to see our usage go up. Lodge usage, interestingly, is very similar to shelters. Whoops, sorry about that. Residents are using about 97% of the time and non-residents 3%. So that's a good number for me. That tells us our own community is making good use of this facility. We also took a look, and this is one of the reasons we're going to be asking you to look at lowering the rate, is we have a lot of availability at the lodge, more than we've had in years past. So during the weekdays, our average is about 64% of the time available, and weekends 56%. Those are big numbers that the lodge is sitting unused. When we did the market analysis, one of the things that we discovered is we are actually we're ahead of the market. The facility that's closest to us is Tibbetts Creek Manor, and when you break down their fee hourly, they're at 144 and we're at 178. And that facility has some different opportunities that the lodge doesn't. So our recommendation to the Parks Commission, and they supported it, was actually to bring those fees down. We made just a modest, very slight drop in the weekday resident rate, a more significant drop in the weekday non-resident, and then all the rest of the fees we're recommending come down. The Beaver Lake Pavilion, this does have a separate fee structure. This is the large sort of picnic shelter outdoor covered area. And we found a different trend here, that we were actually a little bit lower in the market considering the size of the facility. So we're recommending a slight tick up on this one. And then it doesn't say council chambers, but chambers refers to this room. We have, I want to say starting about 5 years ago, started renting this for private use. So the hours by rental type, private events in this room represent about half of the use, and nonprofit use the other half, so it's a pretty even split. And then we grant all of our nonprofits 4 hours of free use in this facility in the Beaver Lake Lodge, but when they exceed 4 hours, they do pay, so that's the fee. Okay. And again, whoops. The proposed update here is a slight decrease if our goal is to increase use of this facility. One thing you'll notice is the weekday rates are blocked out, and I will tell you that it is just not working out to rent this room during the weekdays. It's competing with our own City Hall business, and also tends to be very distractive to the very busy activity that's taking place at the front counter. Okay, my last slide here. Other things to consider or remember, I already mentioned this. Nonprofits receive 4 hours free monthly use during the weekdays, and they definitely take advantage of that. We do have a discount in place, although the auditor is asking us in our next policy update, which will happen next month, to sort of clean this one up. So our recommendation is 2 months prior to the date to allow a 25% rental fee reduction when space is available at the lodge and the chambers. It's kind of a last minute discount. And also 2 months prior to reduce the minimum number of hours required for a weekend reservation. Our policy currently says you have to rent for a minimum of 6 hours, but last minute we would drop that to 2 hours. That's not for discussion tonight, but I plan to incorporate that in a minor policy update next month. Okay, what can I go back to?
Let's start with Ben. You have a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, you're not making a decision. Obviously, you will see this, the whole fee schedule update as part of your budget adjustments coming in November, late November, and then the early December meeting. But I got a question to our esteemed team captain on the adult soccer field. I mean, he does such a wonderful job of coordinating and collecting the fees. We collect about $100 roughly, Hank, about from each adult on the team. That's about, what, 16 or 18 of us, roughly? Okay, so that's about, how many games? 10 games? It's roughly $10 a game. $10. That GSSL, the Greater Seattle, they get some fee from that money. And then they also pay our Parks Department for the rental fees. How does it work? Staff, I'm asking also the Greater Soccer Association, when they rent soccer fields, they contact us to reserve the fields. Is that how that works, Joanna?
Sorry. They are part of the priority scheduling process. So 3 times a year, they can submit for fields prior to them opening up to the general public. Okay. It's the same process the youth go through. They're only asking for 1 field 2 times a week, and we do get them those requested fields.
So each game lasts about 90 minutes, roughly say 1.5 hours at $90 an hour. We're talking about 130, 10 games, $1,300 plus lights. Now I'm talking about the GSSL, what they pay to our Parks Department.
We charge them for lights as well, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
That's a separate charge.
Yes, lights are $20 an hour.
$20 an hour. Okay, so what we're paying is about roughly what the field fee is. Is that what's happening, Hank? Or maybe a couple $100 for the staff time and the staff salaries in the GSSL?
Hire referees as well, so we're paying for, fees paid for referees as well.
Do you think that in our team, that if the fee increases 15, 20%, that you would have any objection from any one of our team members? I don't think so either.
When they retire, though, maybe.
I want to thank Hank that he really, truly does a phenomenal job on that soccer field organization. Thank you.
Ramiro, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to follow up on, I think she was before me. Were you before me, Nancy?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Hank, in looking at your memo, I thought it was important, and following up on what you had just said about adults, that as a commission, we felt a moderate increase was appropriate, but did not feel the full cost recovery was attainable through a fee increase alone without significantly burdening the Sammamish-based sports leagues, which I assume you're talking primarily the youth sports leagues, given your comment that you had made. And I was going to hope you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Well, as we pointed out with the replacement of the turf as well, and the updating of the impact fees, any significant jump can be a hardship. Something phased in over a period of time is going to be easier to tolerate or withstand. I was thinking about it too. Typically, the fields are rented more by youth, and so if we impose a greater fee adjustment on the youth, then we get more bang for our buck, so to speak. But on the other hand, families typically have more than one child, and perhaps in an adult league, it's only one adult per family that's playing. And we don't want to discourage our youth. I mean, I think that's an important part of the development of the youth in the community, keeping them involved in outdoor extracurricular activities, physical activities. So with that in mind, I think that was our reasoning for not increasing the youth at the same percentage as adults. We felt that adults could tolerate it more so than the youth, and again, so that was our reasoning behind it. To go to a full cost recovery just seems too huge a jump at this point, and so we were opting for something that we thought was more reasonable in the interim, rather than the full cost recovery.
Can I have a follow-on question to that, please? To it, because I do value the input, because you guys I see as the voice of the people in this in particular, since you've got both feet playing out there. And since you were unanimous in this recommendation, was there a sense from the Parks Commission that if that big jump occurred, there would be a tailing off, or a number of youth would not participate?
I think that was our general feeling. I don't know if we addressed that point specifically, but I think that was the intent behind it. We heard from a couple of the gentlemen, a couple of the baseball leagues, that it would be a significant burden for them, as you see here, to jump from $56 to $90 for a total cost recovery. That's almost double, and that's a very significant difference there. And
he said 1/3 of their cost was fields.
Exactly. And that also brings up the question: should we have a 0% city subsidy or not? And some would argue, okay, we should have a fee-based, users should pay for it. However, if I go to Pine Lake Park today and go fishing, I don't pay a fee for using the dock. If I use the playground, I don't pay a fee for using the playground. I drove here today. I didn't pay a user fee for my use on there. I didn't pay a toll to drive on the roads here, so.
The state's getting there little by little. They're on 405.
Exactly. So there are things certainly where the city subsidizes, we pay for it with our general taxes, and so the question is, why do we do it? Why should we have a 0% city subsidy for synthetic turf fields? I don't think that's, I think if we were charged for full recovery, I think we would lose a lot of usage on the fields.
Thank you for
sharing. And I think that's the general feeling of the commission.
Nancy?
Which Nancy?
This one. Oh, here.
Nancy Whitten.
Thank you. Couple of comments. First
I
of
got you
all,
on the list.
42% subsidy by the city is a very significant subsidy. As I recall, and you can correct me, Ben or Jesse, our policy is technically, it's supposed to be 100%. So something's wrong with the current system. We looked at it, we subsidized the first few years I was on the council, and I've been here for a dozen years. And then we adopted a policy that we couldn't, going forward, afford to do that and to do all the things we wanted to do for parks. So keeping operating costs in line for everything in the city was a huge part of our budgeting. And a 42% subsidy is not what we agreed that we wanted. So I think something more than what the Parks Commission is recommending is important. And again, you know, I think it's a policy issue. And I frankly think, just like the increase in the home prices, if you're going to have an $800,000 home, or even a $600,000 home, you probably can afford the increase in costs. Even if you have more than one kid, it's what you build into your quality of life. Is you're going to pay for it because you want your kids to participate if they want to participate. So the second thing, I had a question for Jesse on the rental fees, the differentiation between resident and non-resident. If you eliminated even that, you know, only 6% gets charged the higher fee. If you eliminated the non-resident increase, would you in effect be promoting people from coming from all over to squeeze out residents?
That's only cousins.
And I mean, it's at the prime time. I know you have a lot of extra capacity at certain times, but prime time for shelters, for example, would be on weekends. For weddings, it's going to be Saturday night, Friday night maybe, or Sunday. But are you going to be, by having just one fee, having a lot more people come from out of town that you really might not be interested in if they are competing with the residents?
It's a hard question to answer. You know, anecdotally, I observe that we have a lot of non-residents working through residents to get the lower fee. So I think that's going to happen. And what I'm looking at is a purely customer service issue. How do we, having two tiers of fees, and we have tier 1, tier 2, picnic shelter, resident, non-resident, half day, full day. It's just a lot of numbers. That doesn't mean the council has to support that.
If we were to adopt your recommendation, would it be possible for you in a year or 2 year period to gather data to take an analysis of that particular issue?
Absolutely. In fact, we talked, if we did away with the non-resident fee for picnic shelters, for example, one of the things we would want to look at the end of the season is what was the impact. You know, did we get some complaints that residents weren't able to reserve when they were, you know, we would look at that and then evaluate again. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Tom O'Dell.
Thanks. Can we go back to the synthetic turf rental comparison chart?
Oops. Sorry, let me find it.
A couple of things. First of all, Starfire is up here on the far right column. And I take that to be probably the best example of true cost recovery.
What is Starfire?
Starfire, well,
It's a nonprofit.
Down at Tequila, it's a soccer complex.
operation.
They have an indoor as well as numerous outdoor fields.
Private or public?
Private, and actually the Sounders practice there.
So to me, that's probably the best example we have, the only example we have of a true cost recovery-based operation.
But that has profit in it, too.
Some, but it's a nonprofit, though. They probably have an operating surplus, at least I hope they do, but. So then, anyway, they're charging $119 an hour, then almost $30 an hour for lights. And I assume this is outdoors, not indoors, because that's what we're looking at here. Then my eye drifts over to the Lake Washington School District fees, and they're charging $109 plus $32 for lights on the same fields for which we are currently charging $81.50 and $20. To me, there's something wrong with that picture.
Are they renting out the same fields, or is that for the stadium?
That's for the stadiums.
Oh, that's the stadium.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's a different animal.
Okay.
The stadium, David.
Well, okay. My feeling is somewhere in the neighborhood of $109 would be where I'd want to be, and up the light charge as well. Leave the youth at the recommendation. But
But we're not deliberating now, we're just
Yeah,
asking
okay.
questions and getting.
We are
answers.
questions. On the issue of picnic shelter rental fees, what I don't see here is a maintenance cost comparison for what the true cost of running these is. Between now and next time, I'd like to have that. And for indoor facility rental fee rates, the last chart in the packet, I didn't see any information on the utilization. What percentage of the time are they booked? And what's the paid versus non-paid here? Well, I think we saw paid versus non-paid. But one thing to throw into the equation here is looking at the potential impact of the community center. Granted, it's our facility, but those are several more, at least 2 more rooms, and maybe more than that, that are going to be available on the market. So what's the impact of those? Some analysis of that. And the second thing is, what's the Boys and Girls Club charging for their facility?
Questions? We got that information.
Okay. Don?
Well, Tom asked questions about the community center free rooms. I had that on here, and the Big Rock Park house. We're going to have to decide to do something with that eventually. Yeah, the tree house?
Isn't it on
Rent
the
out the
property?
tree house, too.
Yeah,
It is phenomenal.
But that's on a different lot, though, isn't it? Or is it-
Yeah.
we don't own it yet.
So, listen, I agree with what Hank said. I think the commission recommendations make sense, and the point about full recovery means that the people that are renting the fields are paying for the city free concerts and Shakespearean plays, and not to mention the fishing, there's swimming also, and hiking through the trails. So, you know, we shouldn't expect full cost recovery from our users of the parks. And the other question I had was about
Another
the...
question?
Yeah, the first one was
Okay.
about Big Rock Park. The question about the council chamber here, when you said no private use during the week, does that include the nonprofits too? Or so you won't have the planners or the financial people here?
No, and, you know, to be honest with you, we have plenty of capacity at Beaver Lake Lodge, so that's where we've been referring most of our rental groups, and they've been using that space. They're happy to use it.
Councilmember Keller?
Yes, I want to go back to a question that Councilmember Whitman was talking about, the residents' use of the.
Can you use your microphone? Turn it on and get it a little closer.
Yes, I wanted to go back to the residents, non-residents' use of the shelters. I'm wondering, Klahani was a non-resident, and I'm wondering what the impact will be next year on the shelter usage if the fee to them has been cut in half, if we find that our residents use the facility more. It'd be interesting to see what kind of impact that might have. And then the other question was just quickly on the fields, the other cities that we were looking at, for the most part, were in the range that were being proposed. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is really just the capturing the cost of the fields. So the other cities, the cost of the fields are the cost of the fields if they're synthetic turf, so they must be subsidizing.
They may be going to wake up to this too, though.
Pardon?
They may wake up to this as well.
I would think so with the cost of synthetic fields.
So just the question was the impact of Klahani. What will that have? Maybe, you know, if you only go with one rate, you might find out that the usage changes dramatically because Klahani wasn't using our shelters because they were paying a $200 fee, where now they'll only be paying a $100 fee. It might be booked even more than what we have seen in the past.
I apologize, my computer has crashed, so I can't pull up any of the slides. But again, I do know our Klahani residents are some of the worst abusers of the find a friend that's a resident practice.
So if we know this, why aren't we charging double as a penalty?
Was that your question?
No, it was not
okay.
my question.
You're next. She's next.
I find this an interesting conundrum of how we deal with these fields, because the synthetic fields are becoming more and more expensive. One of my questions is, do we need and would we be able to use more natural turf fields if we had the money to acquire land? We have the option still out there to put something in Soaring Eagle Park. We have the property with the YMCA down on, across from the Park and Ride. So would additional natural turf fields be helpful?
Any additional field would be helpful. You know, what we haven't, I think we've been faced with this challenge year after year. We don't have enough fields to accommodate the demand. But when we looked at the park impact fee slides, there's a story there too. Our population has gone up. The league sizes have gone up.
And I understand all that.
Yeah.
That's my question is, if we built more natural turf fields that they could use, would they use them? One of the questions I specifically asked and wanted to make sure was that if we increased the fees, that no child would be turned away from playing, that there were scholarships involved. My concern here is if we don't have full cost recovery, and every time we talk about adding a field or something, there's a letter to the editor or we get emails. My child doesn't play sports. My child is a musician. What are you doing for my child? I'm a senior. I don't need a synthetic field. Why am I paying for this and subsidizing this? So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about as we're looking at these huge subsidies, because there are a lot of other people in the population that we should be serving. And if we're able to do full cost recovery, then I'm very comfortable with full cost recovery. When they talked about when they grew up, they got to go to the park and just play in the park and, you know, play baseball and everything. I grew up in Chicago, and my dad played sports leagues. We got dragged from pillar to post to a different ball game probably 3 times a week. Both my brothers were in the Little League. You know who paid for those teams? The bars or the corporations, because all of the teams were sponsored by somebody. So that this problem didn't exist when I was growing up, because you just had, you know, the bar pay for all the kids' teams.
You need more bars, right?
Well, you know, what we're doing, well, I mean, it's just, but my brother lives in Georgia, and there, the school districts don't pay, nor do the cities pay for the sports teams. It's up to the members, the parents, to go out and find somebody, maybe a professional that's retired, to go out and raise money to help for this. So I think we need to find some other ways to do this, because I'm really concerned about the fact that if we continue to subsidize more and more, we're going to have a large portion of our population that is unserved. And I would prefer to see us spread some of that money amongst some of the rest of the population that would like some services as well.
Nancy Way?
I was personally shocked at the expense of the synthetic turf fields.
Sorry?
I was personally shocked at the expense of the synthetic turf fields.
Yes.
And they bring a standard of athletic participation or athletic field to a much higher level than any of us ever experienced in our time. And I think to increase I want to chime in a little bit more on what Hank said. We were looking at this as an initial increase. We don't want to be revisiting this maybe every year, but every other year, looking at gradually increasing, not a big shock all at once. I think just as we need to revisit the parks impact fees on a more regular basis, we need to look at our costs here and revisit those on a more regular basis and not provide, we probably, 60 is probably too little for the youth, but I think if we went to 80, that would be quite a jump, or 100, that would be quite a jump for them. We can, but over the next 3 years, if we can get it up, to 80, 90, that seems like a reasonable thing.
Yeah, I know that in my, just for one sport, and we're talking Little League Baseball, I was on 2 public ballparks and 2 school ballparks and over the last year. And so they're using also the schools' turf fields as well. So those are out there. I think somebody mentioned that that they might have to go to those more often if the prices go up, but those are out there as well. So there is an inventory of school, at least turf fields for softball and baseball, at least for the little kids at the elementary school. Ben, you wanted to?
Am I next?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure you guys, when you have your kids going to different places to play games, whether it's soccer, lacrosse, and baseball, you have seen the conditions of some of those fields. I have, as a player, as a parent. And then you kind of scratch your head that why aren't they maintaining these fields properly? I play some turf fields that it was like a concrete. You have built beautiful facilities in this community, and I think our staff did a fantastic job of maintaining that. It's okay to subsidize if that's the direction you want to go, but remember that at the budget time. Because quite often what happens is that the budget time, these numbers, $150,000 subsidy, $150,000 or $200,000, we forget about it. And then immediate places that we go to cutting back on the parks. That's what happens with the schools also, unfortunately, that when the schools go into the budget problems, the very first thing that they try to cut back on the auxiliary items. That is not necessarily school hours, but the athletic activities or the art activities. God forbid we teach kids to be a team member, right? So that, and I've been in some jurisdictions that some of those bond measures fail one after the other. The problem with that is if you're not taking care of those kids at school, you're paying it differently somewhere else in the community or in the society. Parks is not to that degree. But the key for us to remember is we easily forget how much subsidy that we're giving to different interest groups. We do that at the budget times. If in fact your intention is to continue with some sort of a subsidy, I like us to, as Councilmember Deputy Mayor Huckabee is suggesting, put a line item. Let's just remind ourselves, overall budget, this is the subsidy that you agree to do it for this particular interest groups.
Okay, Doug, you were next.
Yeah, well, kind of to echo or to tee off what city manager said.
Bob, you want to hand him your?
It is a policy decision. In other words, yeah, there's a subsidy, and we give subsidies to different groups. But the question is, at least in my mind, is it more valuable to put that subsidy into keeping a large number of youth in our community engaged in athletic activities? And yeah, as Nancy said, the turf fields are more expensive, but that's kind of the standard now. And so, again, it's a policy decision, but I think spending more resources on keeping our youth engaged, and in our culture, sports are a major part of that. I think it's a decision worth making.
I would just add to that if you see the condition of some of the turf soccer fields, for example, over at Lake Washington State Park and elsewhere, they just become unusable at some point. They're just not usable because of the breakdown. Nancy?
I want to go back, having participated in the same policy discussion several years ago, and we decided on a policy of 100%, and what we're getting is 48%. a subsidy. I mean, 100%. Remember, when you talk about expanding the number of ball fields, which was a huge push, you're talking about $1.4 million for the 2 fields. That is an initial city contribution for the field construction, plus you have the land dedication. So you are subsidizing upfront these fields, okay? It was felt we could not afford to replace or we could not afford to continue to invest in new fields and new construction unless we had a cost recovery. I mean, these things, it's like every 10 years you've got the total replacement cost of, what is the replacement cost? It's not $1.4 million.
It's 3.6 million total across the system,
So what's roughly at one double field though?
1.4 million now.
1.4 million. So you are subsidy, I mean, it's a tremendous subsidy that will distort what you can do from a capital standpoint. So we decided, because we didn't have the funds to continue that kind of growth that we wanted to see, and balance everything else, not only in the budget, but in parks in particular, what we needed to accomplish had to get a contribution, and our contribution was the initial land value and the construction cost. And what we were trying to do is get 100% replacement only, okay? We weren't trying to get paid back for what we had already put in. It was just that if you use it, this is strictly a user fee. So I feel that we really need to approach that 100% because it limits your options. And maintenance costs, we adopted that back when we were, frankly, had the fatted calf to kill. Nowadays, with the no increase in taxes that we've been hit with and everything else, we have to keep maintenance under control. So you cannot look at the subsidy issue, as Kathy said, outside of the budget context. You have to look and say, it's like the Union Fire District fees that keep increasing incrementally a portion of our budget. I think it started out at 25%, it's now at 30-some. You can't afford to have that kind of an increase when you look at everything in the city. So it's not just an isolated, is it going to support the use or not? I mean, the best way to go to provide fields for everyone would be to do natural turf. Then you don't have this horrendous $150,000 a year for replacement cost. So, I mean, it's really a policy issue to be balanced in a context of what you want to accomplish for park and where your money's going to come from.
Councilmember Valderrama and then Odell.
And no, I agree with everything that's been said here. But I think that's part of the problem that we have. Because while we have this policy, the reality is we haven't been abiding by that policy. We've been saying that also what's the most important is our percentage of youth. We put $35 million into this community center with the Y. We have a skate park. We have the Boys and Girls Clubs, all to get the kids off the streets and being attended. So I hear the part that we're saying, but the reality is we haven't been acting that way. And we've been emphasizing that that's a priority for us. So we need to have a real coming together and deciding what is the real policy that we're going to be doing. Up to now, there are a lot of people in this community who were very loud in voicing out that they did not want an aquatic center. They weren't going to participate in an aquatic center, and that was the wrong thing to do. We made a conscientious decision for the youth to put the $35 million in there with the Y, as we did with the Boys and Girls Club. I think that if you look at all indicators to keep kids off the streets, you either get them in sports or you get them in church, and it's easier to get them in sports than to get them into church. Although Pope Francis may change that with the way things are going. That said, also, and to Nancy Way's point, the fields here are unbelievable compared to what I grew up with. And when we go to the showcase tournaments in Las Vegas, our fields here in Sammamish are better than the fields in Las Vegas that we see, or in California when we go to Surf Cup and that. But the quality of our teams and the expectations of the families here are also, I mean, whether it's our football teams, our soccer teams, girls or boys, even our cheer teams are state champions here. I mean, across the board, the expectations of the families here of how they produce the kids, and that also drives a lot of kids to compete there and gets them off the street. There's a real sense of pride of Sammamish. I mean, when they have the battles of the plateau between these high schools, you should see how they go at it out here, and all of them, and that's something to be commended of our community. So I understand that I, more than anyone, am fiscally conscientious on it, but I'm also looking at what's the social cost if we don't continue to invest into our kids and our youth. And I also think we need to be investing into our adults, and hope, to your question, Don, about Mary Piggott's property, they need to be better served here because that percentage is increasing as well. But currently we have 1/3 of our population under 18. And if we're going to be putting it into the community center, into the boys and girls, we need to come and reconcile that and conscientiously say, what is our policy, and let's continue forward, and what are the costs if we don't do that? Thank you.
Councilmember Odell?
Did I just hear you say that you agree with everything that's been said, and that's part of the problem?
That's correct. That is correct. Absolutely.
Okay, I couldn't let that one go. One of the things I've been hearing tonight is a lot about resident versus non-resident utilization. And I think part of the problem is that, with a couple of exceptions, there are many areas where we don't know who's really using our facilities. And I'm going to make a budget suggestion right now for the city manager for the mid-buy budget update. And that is that we find a way to spend a little bit of money to perhaps do some research on this. I don't know if it's going around with a clipboard and asking people where they live, or if we do a license plate survey in the parks, or whatever we do. But you know, there's nothing like data to help you arrive at a decision. So that's one thing. You know, we run a Cadillac park system here. We really do, and we're all proud of it. Sometimes I think it go a little overboard. Did Skyline High School really need a new stadium? I gotta wonder about that, but that's not our decision. That's not our decision. But the fact that we have fields that are national tournament quality is great. I mean, we can brag about it. Is that the best use of our funds? And we want a good one, but do we really need an outstanding one? And Ramiro, maybe we ought to get you to recruit the tournament for us up here.
I've said we would be better served putting it here, better fields and
Okay.
company.
Ben will close this. We've had a nice, long discussion, and we need to wrap it up.
Very good discussion, good comments, good questions. We'll try to get back to you some of those answers. I don't think that we have a consensus tonight as to where we want it to be, and we will definitely take into consideration and come back to you. And the fee schedule update, it will be part of the resolution, and we may want to just put this as a separate line item. Jesse, remind me, please, that during the mid-buy adjustments, let's not bundle this with the rest of the fee schedule update, so we'll come back to you with this separate line item and agenda item to talk about it further. Thank you. I think we accomplished everything we wanted to accomplish tonight. Good work.
We're adjourned.